swordsman who conquered half the world. Runkendal, a family of renowned swordsmen where everyone has exceptional talent and strength. Its members have become unsurpassed rulers of the world. Fight it out, conquer it, and enslave them. That's the motto of the Runkendal family, the family to which Jean Runkendal belongs, the youngest of the Runkendals. At the selection ceremony that determines your future, Jin chose the sword of the head of the family. This means that he is the one who will lead the Runkendal family. A mysterious man approached him and said that his choice met expectations. Interesting, Jin thought. Jin did not doubt that the future would bring him success and fame, but he has no talent for swordsmanship. Jin was called a disgrace to the various departments and was said to fall short of his family standards. He was considered the worst swordsman in the family's history. Even his brothers joked about him practicing with a wooden sword. They said he wasn't worthy of the Barasada. Jin was silent, looking down. One of the brothers approached him and asked why he was silent. Then he kicked him in the stomach and ordered him to respond to his big brothers. Jin fell clutching his stomach. Sitting on the floor, he reached for his sword, but his brother pinned down his arm. He said there was no point in training him, and Jin grumbled in pain. Then this guy, holding a notebook in his hands, asked, "What is it?" Disrespectfully asked if he thought that after reading the book, he would learn swordsmanship. The blonde brother, holding his wooden sword in his hand, said that the Jin was nothing, and he was not worthy of a chance, explaining that if they are given a chance, they forget their place and cling to hope. He asked why his brother did this. Then one of them grabbed Jin by the hair and told him that he was only doing it for his good. Then one of them asked if this was what his nanny taught him. Jin said it wasn't Jilly's fault. His brothers again reproached him for contradicting them and decided to teach him matters. All Jin knew was that he needed to keep training. He believed that only by training hard would he gain the recognition of his family, and that he would eventually be recognized as a Runkendal. Jin was banished from the castle. From now on, he is no longer part of the family. He was kept alive because of his efforts, but after 25 years, he was exiled from his family and doomed to a miserable existence. But then he met the master and realized that he had a talent, and not just the talent, but a talent for magic, which is forbidden in his family. Then the stories move forward 3 years, and we see Jin trying to replenish his mana by combining it with natural mana. But suddenly, a black aura envelops him. Jin is at a loss as to what happened. Suddenly, a cloud of dark aura appears behind him. Jin asked him who he was. His name was Solderit, and he was the Lord of Shadows. Our hero also introduced himself by giving his name. The Shadow Lord then offered Jin a contract. Jin was shocked. Solderit promised him that if Jin agreed, he would gain more than just shadow control, but it could also remove any curse, with the help of the shadows. Solderit discovered that Jin had been greatly hated as a child, and that his talents were sealed by a curse. It's called the Blade Illusion, and it suppresses your swordsmanship abilities. Such a terrible curse could not have fallen on one of the Runkendal. That's what attracted the Shadow Lord. He stated that from now on, Jin would not be affected by any curse. The Shadow Lord said that he would enjoy watching Jin become an outstanding magic swordsman. The magic dissipated, and Jin went outside to test his swordsmanship skills. Drawing his sword from his belt, he lunged. Jin was surprised that Solderit was telling the truth. Now, holding the sword in his hands, Jin felt how light it was, like a feather. While swinging his sword, Jin tried to add some magic. Thus, he was able to combine sword and magic. And now the worst swordsman in Runkendal history doesn't exist. Jin exclaimed enthusiastically that he was finally buying it. 3 knights who were watching Jin all this time appear from behind the bushes. Suddenly, Jin opens his eyes and hears screams covered in rocks and covered in blood. He couldn't move. His body felt so heavy. He keeps hearing screams. Then he began to call out to the master and Solderit, even though he is near death. Jin can't believe he died in his sleep. He gets obsessive thoughts that he is a non-entity. He regrets that he just got the chance to combine magic with the power of Solderit. In desperation, he only asks if it really had to end like this, and if so, why was he even given the chance? Then we see Jin being transported back to his childhood. He is surrounded by men from his family. Jin wonders what's going on. He knows he's dead and can't believe what's happening. The girl turns to him and tells him to give it his all. Jin recognizes the same nanny Gilly. Looking at the space around him, he sees a field littered with swords and recognizes the same sword, the sword of Barasan. Suddenly, Jin realizes that he's at the selection ceremony. He went back in time. He is only 1 year old now. Everyone who was at the ceremony, the group of people were shocked and couldn't believe their eyes. His relatives knew that this sword was the sword of the head of the family, and we see that the head of the family himself says that his youngest son chose the Barasada. With that, the selection ceremony was over, and the order was given. Jin must be taken to the Castle of the Storm. We have a view of the Tempest Castle. It looks really grand, and even lives up to its name. A hand tries to reach the book. We can see that it's Jin. After failing to pick up the book, he picks up a chair to reach out. In parallel, he says that it has already been 6 years since he was sent here. According to the family's rules, Jin will stay in the castle until he is 10 years old. This means that he will stay in the castle for another 3 years. But as we can see, this does not please him. Suddenly, shouts are heard from somewhere. When asked what happened, a shocked maid sitting on the floor says to the main character, "There's a dead bird in his room." Seeing this, Jin says that the only people in the castle who can do such a thing are when his twin brothers suddenly step in and say, "Oh, look." From their facial expressions, it immediately becomes clear that it was they who killed the poor bird. One of these brothers is called Daytona Runkandel. He is 9 years old and the 11th of the 13 sons of Rankandel. The second one is called Hayden Runkandel. He is also 9 years old. He is the 12th of Runkandel's 13 sons. They sarcastically asked Jin if he liked the gift, but Jin didn't say anything. Jin only thought that he knew what kind of killers they would grow up to be. They're only 9 now, and they've already killed a defenseless bird just to torment Jin. Hayden tells Jin that he's annoyed with him, but Jin still doesn't say anything. Then they ask him about the fact that the future head of the family really does not put them in anything, and they joke about where his Barasada is. Jin said something, but Hayden didn't hear him, so he started teasing him. He told Jin to repeat it. Jin fell silent again. Then Hayden grabbed him by the shoulder and almost hit him, but Jin blocked the kick just in time. Hayden was at a loss. Jin told Hayden to shut up. Jin was giving off dark energy. Jin then slapped his brother. Hayden, in turn, was outraged and exclaimed about how Jin dares to beat him. Then Jin hit him again. This time the impact was even stronger. With the words that Jin had endured for a long time, he prepared for the next blow, and a mysterious dark energy was still coming from him. Jin punched Hayden again, this time in the stomach. Jin said that from now on, it was best for his brothers to stay out of his sight. Just then, a man with a red cloak came to the noise. He saw that the twin brothers were lying unconscious, and Jin was standing next to them. This person asked about what had happened here. Turning to the young master, Jin, still emitting dark energy from his hand, said the man's name. His name was Khan. Khan turned to Jin and asked him what he had done. The young master lied to the Khan, saying that the twin brothers had fought with each other. Khan didn't believe the young master and asked again. Jin then gave Khan a cold look and said that they had fought and then plummeted. Khan had expected nothing less from the Runkandel. Even children were merciless, he thought, and with Hayden in his hands, he didn't argue with Jin and only accepted his lie to take the brothers to the doctor. But Jin interrupted him and said that they didn't need to see a doctor right now. He motioned for Khan to follow him. It was raining outside at this time, and the weather was not the most pleasant. We see Jin just finished burying the very bird that his brothers killed. He was leaning slightly over the bird's burial site. He buried the bird under a tree next to the two unconscious brothers. It was raining outside, and Khan asked the young master if he wanted to drop the twins right there, and noticed that the rain continued to increase. Turning to Khan with a cold look, he said that they needed to think about their behavior. Khan had no choice but to obey the master's order. Jin went to the castle. He left his brothers in the mud, in the rain, but didn't feel for a second that he had done anything wrong. Khan just stared at Jin from behind him. Suddenly, he felt a strange power. It came from the boy. Khan was confused because Jin's power was not like an aura. Han took a closer look at Jin's hand, which was emitting dark energy. He couldn't believe it was magic. If Khan was right, then they had bigger problems than their brothers' quarrels. He must report to the head about what happened. Then the Khan called out to a passing servant. He ordered him to saddle his horse. Meanwhile, Jin was already in the castle. He watched Khan from the window. Jin immediately knew that Khan wanted to report everything to his father. Khan wasn't just their security guard, but also the one who kept an eye on them. Jin realized that since he thought the boy had magic, he wasn't going to give up. So dark energy radiated from Jin's hand. It turns out that this is the energy of shadows. It is proof of his contract with Soldaret, the Shadow Lord. With this power, Jin realized that even death didn't break their contract in this life. Thanks to this power, he was immune to curses. In particular, the curse that was on him in his previous life, namely the Blade Illusion Curse. Thanks to this, He was no longer the worst swordsman in the family's history, as he was called in his previous life. Jin was determined that a lot of things would be different from what they were in his previous life. Then Jin decided that he needed to do something. Meanwhile, Han had already finished reporting to his father about what had happened. He was kneeling one day. The father is clearly not happy with this course of events and did not comment on what happened, only repeated the words of Khan that the younger one beat up the twins. After that, the patriarch turned to the Khan. He told him to gather the knights. The father is going to the youngest. After bowing to his father, one of the bannermen announced that all 7 bannermen and 200 knights were ready. Among them is a white-haired girl, the same guy who reported they were ready, a smiling girl with black hair, and a guy next to her. The next shot shows us 3 more flag bearers. After gathering all the bannermen and knights, the patriarch headed for Tempest Castle. Here we see for the first time what he looks like. He's dressed all in black, has ashen hair, and looks menacing. A woman's voice saying that everyone was gathered so such an official visit. He chose what he considered appropriate treatment. Luna was surprised by Jin's answer and admitted that it was very comprehensive. Chiron told the boy that he was in the castle today for a different reason, so the boy can call him father. Chiron decided to ask Jin the same question he had asked the twins. He asked about what prompted Jin to do this. Jin clenched his fist and said it was just revenge. He said that every Runkendel should give what they deserve. Mary was surprised by his words. Jin continued by saying that it didn't matter if they did him good or evil. Chiron said nothing. Then he ordered Jin to stay and everyone else to come out. The knights began to discuss the situation. They talked about whether the junior was able to pass the head test. One of the flag bearers told them not to stand around and follow orders. The knights obeyed. Everyone headed for the exit. Before she left, Mary turned around and said with a smile that a conversation with her father alone was pretty good for such a small child. As soon as everyone left, Chiron said that he would like to ask Jin a few questions in person. According to the twins, Jin has some special power. Jin tried to hide it and started talking about how Runkendel isn't allowed to use magic after all. Then you cannot fully focus on fencing and reach the top of your skill. But Chiron was insistent and once again asked the boy what this power was. He said that if it was magic, he wouldn't just let it go. Jin started to answer, thinking that as long as his father knew about his powers, he wouldn't let go. The boy himself wondered what kind of power it was. The power of Soldaret. Jin said that he didn't know what it was. Maybe magic. Or maybe aura. It began to emit shadow energy. He was wondering what such a power was called, so he created a bundle of dark energy to demonstrate it to his father. He asked his father to help him figure it out. Seeing this, the patriarch suddenly realized what kind of power it was. This is the power of the founder of the Runkendel family. By taking a look at this, the father realized that the boy has the energy of shadows, the same energy that the Barasata has. The patriarch came to the conclusion that he was indeed destined to lead the family. The boy, holding a ball of shadow energy, turned to his father. The patriarch spoke. He said that Jin had the power of Soldaret, the god of shadows. Jin asked his father if it was really the power of the shadow god. The patriarch confirmed it. The patriarch told him that Soldaret had made a contract with Lord Tamer, the founder of the Runkendel family. However, since Tamer's death, the shadow god was never seen again. The patriarch couldn't explain why Soldaret had decided that, but it looked like Soldaret was trying to contact the Runkendel through Jin. Then the boy said that he wanted to ask his father something. He asked his father about the shadow god. Why Soldaret? It is stronger than Chiron. The patriarch turned his back and pondered. He said he didn't know and that he had never had to fight a god before. Jin pondered the answer, puzzled. Looking at Chiron's smiling face, he couldn't think of a better answer. The patriarch turned to Jin. He called him son, and his hands started moving closer to Jin's head. Jin was startled. He thought something was going to happen, but Chiron placed his hand on his son's head and praised him. He told him it was good to ask. His innocent question gave Chiron a great topic of conversation. Chiron said that seeing Jin was the right thing to do. He added that he also wanted to ask a question. He wondered what Jin would do with his power. Jin put his hand to his heart and said that he was going to use it for the good of the family. Then the father looked at the boy with a skeptical look. After that, a smile appeared on his stubbly face and he exclaimed loudly that the Jin made him laugh. Jin didn't understand what was going on. He stood silently in front of his father. Jin's father told him that he beat up his brothers and put them outside in a thunderstorm. How he dares to say that the power is for the good of his family. Jin stood silently with his head bowed. The patriarch told Jin not to lie to him. Jin knew that his father wouldn't just forget about it. Jin was trembling, but he still found the courage and determination to respond. He uses his power to achieve his goals. His father frowned again and looked at Jin when suddenly he said that he liked this answer. Jin was surprised that such an answer suited his father. Chiron headed for the exit. As he passed Jin, he said that he would keep an eye on him. Chiron walked out, but Jin was still standing in the same spot. Once the door closed, Jin could no longer contain his emotions. He was really scared, panting. He was glad he had gotten away with it. He was also glad that he was able to find out what this shadow energy was, and that it was justified. He couldn't have expected his father to be interested. A moment from his previous life popped up in his mind. A moment where he was standing broken behind his father, who didn't even pay attention to him. But this life is the exact opposite of the last one. Clenching his fist, Jin thought with a smile on his face. Jin and his nanny were taking a walk in the Tempest Castle. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was Mary, and she handed him the box. He asked his sister what it was. She said it was a special gift from her big sister. She gave it to the babysitter, saying it was heavy. What was in that box? Jin didn't know and couldn't guess. Mary told him to cook it well, to chew it thoroughly, and she wished him to grow up big and strong. Defus asked Mary where her suitcase was. She said she gave it to Junior. Hearing this, Jin wondered why she had given it to him. Jin opened the suitcase. When he opened it, the nanny was shocked. Orange energy radiated from the box. He saw that there was something that looked like a heart, and a strange energy was coming from it. It turned out to be the heart of a phoenix, and Jin was confused. To give something like this to a child, you have to be crazy. Mary Runkendals, Knight of the 6th rank. They called her Wind Fury. She has another nickname, but few people know about it. The Mad Woman of the Southern Lands. The battle-mad sister had given Jin such a gift. Her wishes for him to grow big and strong were not empty words. She wanted him to fight her. Jin was sitting at the table. He reasoned that if you eat the phoenix heart at such a young age, you can not only get resistance to fire, but also grow faster. He had already imagined that he might even be able to summon a phoenix in this lifetime. Meanwhile, the nanny came over with a plate in her hands. She set the plate down on the table and noticed that Lady Mary had given Jin such a lovely present. She asked Jin to start eating while the dish was still warm. Jin was about to start, but the two brothers were standing behind him. They looked like they were hungry too. He asked them not to delay and directly say what they wanted. They didn't show any sign of insinuating that they had cooked too much, that Jin couldn't handle the whole pot alone. Jin asked them if they really wanted it, and they immediately started nodding. Then Jin decided to give them something to do. The two brothers went to the mine and dug. Of course, they weren't happy that they were doing this, they thought. Why should they? They wondered what the point of all this was. They were afraid that they would get in trouble for digging around here. The second brother said that if something happens, the younger one will answer. Forgetting about all the inconveniences for the sake of soup, they continued to dig. Suddenly it turned out that the mine they were digging was directly above a certain room. Suddenly we see that a person is in a cell that is filled with water. It is immediately clear that it is well protected. We can see what kind of person he is. It gives off a dark aura that resembles the energy of shadows. Seeing his face, it becomes clear that he is unconscious, and most likely, he was imprisoned in such a place. The twins did return. They had completed Jin's errand. The nanny was at a loss as to what they were doing. Upon their return, Jin congratulated them and said that they had done it quickly. The two brothers were exhausted, and their clothes were covered in mud. They were standing with a shovel, pickaxe, and lantern. One of them said that they had completed Jin's errand and were entitled to soup. Then Jin, who was wearing a raincoat, said that the soup was already waiting for them on the table. Daytona was glad to hear that, but when they saw 2 spoons with some soup in them, the only thing they could say was to ask where. Then they turned to Jin and called him little brother. They were not happy with the fact that there was only a teaspoon, and it did not seem to him that this was not enough. Jin replied that he said he would give you some soup, but didn't say how much. After that, he rhetorically asked if he kept his promise and then wished him a good appetite. Brothers sarcastically thanked him, clearly displeased. Then the action takes place in the forest, among the trees. Jin took off his hood. He seems to have noticed something. It turns out that Jin came to the same mine where the twins were digging. He had given them an assignment to dig a mine for a bit and didn't expect them to try so hard. After knocking on the wall, Jin determined that a first-rank spell would be enough to break through such a wall. After that, Jin created a green ball in his hands and a green-colored magic aura appeared around it. He said that he was almost upset that he hadn't used his magic for so long. He leaned his hands against the wall. Rocks flew in all directions. Jin managed to break through the wall. It turned out that he got into the secret storage of the Runkendals. Looking at the sealed gate, he thought that in his previous life, he never got here, so now he feels somewhat awkward. He stood in front of the gate and thought about what his older brother had told him, namely the code phrase needed to open the gate. Jin, standing in front of the door, said that the Runkendal child wanted to comfort Murakhan. That was the secret code. The door began to move. It opened, and Jin entered the vault. This vault holds the secrets of the families that the Runkendal has destroyed over the past millennium. This storage was really huge. Only the Rain-Kindled Bannerman could enter this vault. In his previous life, Jin's brother had said that he didn't need to know about this place since he wouldn't be the standard bearer anyway. Even so, his brother helped Jin. Remembering this, Jin decided that now he would find a use for his knowledge. Suddenly, Jin saw a strange dark aura. He didn't understand what it was. When he got a better look, he saw that there was a human inside the cell. But then he saw that he had scales on his face and realized that he wasn't a human. At first, he thought about where this creature came from. But suddenly, he realized something very important. In the same code phrase, the name Murakhan is pronounced. Jin guessed that the creature behind the glass was Murakhan. Jin wondered if this was the Black Dragon Murakhan. It is said that the first standard bearer defeated the Black Dragon and sent him into a deep sleep. Up until this point, Jin hadn't believed in legends. He thought they were just fairy tales. Jin stood looking at Murakhan for a moment longer. Then he came to his senses, and his priority was the books he was looking for. Jin continued to search for books. Suddenly, Murakhan, who had been sleeping for centuries, moved his finger. Jin found the book he was looking for. He was standing in front of a bookshelf, and he said that it contained the secrets of various clans. Deciding to start with the Kungan family, who were also swordsmen, he picked up the book. As he read, he realized that the theory was too complicated for third-rank magic. Jin wanted to take all the books with him, but then he might be caught with the books, especially since there was nowhere to hide them. Then he found a way out of the situation. He decided that he would come and copy books. He came back from the vault and read the book copied from there as if nothing had happened, but no one could suspect him. The next day, he also sat and copied the book in the vault. Suddenly, he heard strange noises. He was scared, so he got up from the table and put things off for later. Jin asked who was there. He couldn't believe that someone would come here from Tempest Castle at this hour. Suddenly the doors opened and the man turned to Jin and asked who he was. Jin was shocked he recognized Murakhan. He couldn't understand why Murakhan had awakened. Remember ever hearing about his awakening in his previous life. At the same time, Murakhan stared at the boy in silence. There were scales on his face, and his eyes were like a snake and glowed yellow. Jin stood there in fear. He tried to reassure himself that Murakhan the dragon were the Runkendal family's guardians, and that if Jin showed respect, he would spare the child. Introduced himself, he said he was a Runkendal child, and that he welcomes the guardian of the family. Hearing this, Murakhan's face changed. His veins bulged even on his forehead. Suddenly, he started shouting and asking Jin what he called him. Murakhan asked Jin again if he had called him a guardian. He was furious and shouted so loudly that Jin covered his ears with his hands. Murakhan also indignantly asked, how dare Jin treat him like a servant? He started cursing Runkendals. He was shouting about what Runkendal had told the descendants, that he was now considered a guardian. He said he wouldn't take it out on the small stuff, but he's furious. But come to think of it, he'd already snapped at Jin, then Murakhan, and calmed down. Crouching down and repeating the word devil several times, he took a deep breath in and out, then said he'd been locked up for a while, just woke up, and saw a child. Jin stood in front of Murakhan puzzled and didn't understand anything when Murakhan suddenly leaned over the boy and tried to smell something. He asked why Jin smelled like shadow energy. Murakhan said that even though he had slept for 1,000 years, he definitely hadn't forgotten the smell. According to him, only those who sign a contract with Solaret smell like Timur, the founder of Runkendals, once did. Suddenly, the boy understood why Murakhan had awakened, that it was all because of his strength. Meanwhile, Murakhan was trying to smell where the shadow energy was coming from. Benjin decided that it was time to try something. He turned to Murakhan. Murakhan asked him what the boy knew about shadow energy. Jin personally demonstrated his mastery of shadow energy. Jin said that according to his father, the god of shadows gave the boy his power. This clearly didn't please Murakhan, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing, hoping it was a joke. He was very upset that the one he had been waiting for 1,000 years was just a child. As a result, there was an awkward pause between them. The two of them stood in silence, looking at each other. Murakami was on his knees, exhausted, and turned to Jin. He told him a story about how he had once made a promise to Soldaret, and it looked like Murakami would have to team up with Jin to fulfill that promise, to ask Murakami and something about his promise to Soldaret. But Murakami cut him off. He said that he would explain everything later, because he had just woken up and wasn't thinking straight yet. And I don't think Jin will understand, but at least he wanted to introduce himself properly to Soldaret's contractor. Shadow energy appeared around Murakami. Jin was shocked at how much shadow energy Murakami was using. Murakami introduced himself and said that he was a representative of Soldaret. His hand was shrouded in shadow energy, and there were claws where his fingers should have been. Gradually, his body was completely shrouded in this energy. Murakami also said that he is a friend of Soldaret and the last descendant of the first creature created from the shadow. Murakami was completely different from his human form. His eyes glowed white, and he had wings instead of arms. Finally, he turned into a dragon, and a powerful shadow energy radiated from him. He said that according to the 1,000-year contract, from now on, he would serve Jin. Jin couldn't say a word. He just wondered if such a great being would serve him. In the form of a dragon, asked Jin for his name. In response, Jin smiled and looked at Murakami. When he knocked off his first, he revealed himself as Jin, the 13th and youngest of the Runkendel family. The Black Dragon, Murakami. Mount Murakami, a place with violent winds, is named after this dragon. Once upon a time, the Black Dragon Murakami ruled the lands of the Runkendel. But 1,000 years ago, Temur defeated Murakami, and the Storm Castle is said to have been destroyed. As a result, Murakami fell into a deep sleep. Jin came out of the vault. He wasn't sure if the Founder's guardian dragon was telling the truth. Anyone who makes a contract with a god must be paired with a guardian dragon. However, the guardian of Soldaret didn't know anything about the dragon. Jin assumes it's all because of Murakami's hibernation, but now that he's awake, he's going to be a personal guardian, Jin thought. At the entrance to the vault, he indicated in advance that he had come. Murakami glad to see the boy more precisely what he brought with him. Jin gave him a snack that the nanny had prepared for him. Jin said that since they would spend the next few days together, it is worth asking Murakami about everything that he is interested in. That's how Jin hid Murakami in the secret library for a long time while Murakami ate. Jin asked him questions, and once again, Jin asked about the battle with Temur. Murakami said he shouldn't remember because it was 1,000 years ago. Jin just stood there, not knowing what to say. Murakami said he was sure of one thing, but before he finished, he asked for another strawberry pie. It turned out that the ancient black dragon liked strawberry pie. Murakami asked Jin what he was doing here. Jin said he brought empty books and wrote down everything. Murakami said he was surprised and asked if Jin understood anything at all. Only about 30%, Jin said. Murakami told him not to lose heart and complimented him on how good it was for his age. Other children are not capable of this. And even lazy Jin retorted that this was true for ordinary children, and he's a Runkendel, and he can't afford it. He has 12 older brothers and sisters, and also mom, dad, grandparents. And if he wants to crush them, he'll have to try harder. Jin asked Murakami how much of this book the founder himself would have understood. Jin thought about how he would look compared to the strongest man in history, how he could have proved himself. Murakami replied that at Jin's age, he wouldn't have understood a single line, but theory is not always necessary. Murakami said that even though Temur didn't read books, he still fought well. He added that Jin has the potential of Temur, but he is no match for him. It seems that Jin is very hurt by this. He asked Murakami if this meant that he would never lead the family. After a brief pause, Murakami said no. Putting his hand on Jin's head, he said that Jin was still young. He needs to be patient and train more, and then he will be as strong as Temur. Murakami said that Jin might even be able to surpass him. Then when Jin asked if he really believes this, Murakami replied that this is indeed the case, and he said that Soldaret had a nickname, Infinity. His power is limitless, so as his contractor he too possessed this power now. So he told Jin to keep his head up and believe in himself. So Murakami decided to teach Jin a secret technique to lighten his mood a little. This palm on Jin's back releases some energy. The boy was in pain and asked what kind of technique it was. Murakami said that this is a technique for releasing shadow energy. It was the first time Jin had ever heard of such a technique, which wasn't surprising since he wasn't experienced in using shadow magic yet. According to Murakami, this technique should be able to be used by anyone who is connected with shadow magic, but Murakami warned that if the boy did not master everything, it could be dangerous. So they will learn carefully and gradually. Interested, the boy accepted the terms and immediately asked where to start. Murakami said that first, you need to learn how to unleash mana. Jin remembered that he often did this in his previous life. Murakami explained that releasing shadow energy is opening and moving the flow of mana. To do this, you need to have perfect mana control. He said they would be doing it for the next 2 or 3 years. Jin then thought that it was too long. Murakami smiled and looked away, saying that you can't learn something advanced without knowing the basics, so once they learn how to move their mana. Meanwhile, Jin had already revealed his mana. Holding the magic sphere in his hands, he asked Murakami what to do next. As soon as Murakami saw this, he was shocked. How did he do it as Murakami? It turned out that Jin had been able to do this for a long time. Murakami said that he couldn't believe his eyes, so he asked Jin if he wanted to learn how to move mana. But Jin, as if nothing had happened, immediately moved the mana sphere from one hand to the other. Murakami was pleasantly surprised by this. He said that only the greatest geniuses are capable of such a thing. Since the boy had all the basics, Murakami had no choice but to show what the release of shadow energy looked like. Here I can explain that the energy of shadows is drawn, oddly enough, from shadows. Solderit created all the shadows in the world. Meanwhile, we see that the shadows around Murakami begin to distort and seem to reach out to him. Solderit, it is the lord of all the shadows of the world, and Jin is his follower. Suddenly, shadows began to move across the floor. Shadows from all objects suddenly came to life and gathered in one place under Murakami's feet. Murakami said that Jin could also become a Shadow Lord. He turned to the boy and asked him what he thought about it. This was the release of shadow energy. Jin's face was ecstatic. At the same time, a battle took place somewhere in the forest. Lady Luna stood with a sword in her hands over the monster she had defeated. A knight turned to her and informed her that everything was clear on their territory. There are 5 areas left to be cleaned up, which you need to deal with in order to complete the task. According to Luna, 4 months is enough for them, and now the knights can rest. With a look full of sadness, she was standing on a battlefield. She swung her sword, shaking off the blood on it. She wondered what 9-year-olds usually like. The corpses of various creatures were scattered around her. Half a year later, the twins left the Tempest Castle. The twins said that they would see each other again, and Jin wished them to take care of themselves. And so the twins got into the carriage and drove away. Meanwhile, Jin has already turned 9 years old. His nanny, Jilly Yu, wished him a happy birthday and gave him a pie. Jin thanked the nanny and asked her to give everyone a piece. Then all of a sudden, Khan came into the room. Khan apologized for interrupting. Jin asked him what had happened. Jin started talking as Luna was already entering the castle. Khan informed Jin that Lady Luna had arrived at the castle. Jin and the nanny were surprised by Luna's visit. Luna was the first standard bearer of the Runkendal and the Knight of the 9th rank. She was the firstborn of the head of the family. The nickname White Whale has been established for her. Even though Luna was stronger than her siblings, she wasn't interested in a power struggle. She's not involved in a dirty war for the throne, so she's really like a lone white whale. That's why Luna never cared about the other children. In his previous life, Jin and Luna didn't even seem to be a family. They were so far apart. That's why her visit surprised Jin so much. At first, Jin thought something terrible had happened. He then assumed that she had somehow found out that he was in the secret library. Luna's first sentence was just that Jin had grown up. Jin thought it was an official visit, so he told Luna that if he had known she was coming, he would have dressed appropriately. Luna, in turn, only said that he was cute, and that she only came here to wish him a happy birthday. Jin was confused and didn't understand what was going on. Luna took him by the shoulders and asked if he was ill because he didn't look well. Jin replied that he wasn't sick, but just a little nervous. Suddenly, Luna was lost in thought. Jin said it's the first time he's seen her up close. That's why he's on edge. Suddenly, Luna thought about his words. She realized that Jin might have thought she wanted to bully him or something, because it's normal for the Runkendal family to keep relatives in check, steal from them, and trample them in the mud. Suddenly, Luna became nervous, and after a short pause, hesitantly said that she had behaved disrespectfully. Jin was surprised and asked her again. Then Luna said that Jin might be young, but she shouldn't have forgotten that he was Runkendal after all. She lowered her eyes and apologized to Jin. She got down on one knee and said to him she wanted to talk to him in private, and asked him if Nanny and the Knights could leave them for a while. Jin was surprised that she wanted to talk to him alone. He replied that he would also like to talk, but he still didn't understand what she wanted. But he assumed it was nothing bad, the reason why she came without an invitation. Jin is interested and asks what it is. Luna said that when his father visited him, his behavior attracted all the siblings. Then she took his hand gently and told him that it meant that once he left the Castle of Storm, they would be watching him closely. Luna was clearly worried about her brother's fate and said something else to him. She hoped that he could live happily ever after without getting involved in a family conflict. Luna really didn't want Jin to be harmed by the Runkendell family's customs. After saying that, Jin realized why Luna had decided to visit him. It turns out that my sister came out of the war for the throne. Jin then wondered why she didn't tell him about it in her previous life if she didn't want him to get involved in the war for the throne. There were two possible reasons why this happened. Perhaps it was because he was unworthy to even speak to her. Or maybe in her previous life, she didn't warn him because no one even saw him as a rival. Jin put his hand on Luna's wrist and said that he was really grateful to her, but he really wasn't going to get knocked out of the game. Then Luna tried to change his mind by saying that she really wasn't joking and that she wasn't talking to him because she thought he would become her competitor. Jin let it be known that he knew it was serious, but there was already an attempt of assassination. By assassination, he meant that he had a curse on him and his death in a previous life. Suddenly, Luna's face changed abruptly, and she asked Jin what he was talking about. Jin said that because of this, there is no turning back. Suddenly, a dark purple aura began to emanate from Luna, and she asked Jin who dared to do this. Angered, she asked again about who had dared to attack him. In the Tempest Castle, the entire room, and even the cup on the table, began to shake from the aura of Luna. Jin looked up at Luna. Her eyes were filled with anger, and she was ready to kill the one who dared to attack Jin. She asked Jin a few more times who wanted to kill him, but Jin chose to hide it by saying that it was classified information. Then he clarified that he didn't really know who it was, but even though he was attacked, he's fine right now. Thanks to Luna's reaction, Jin realized that not all of his relatives hated him, and he was glad to see that they didn't. Suddenly, Luna, full of sadness, hugged Jin. It turns out that Jin has already been dragged into this vile conflict. Luna said it saddened her. In his previous life, Jinny wouldn't have thought that Luna was so kind and empathetic. Luna changed the subject and said that today is a holiday, and you should not talk about sad things. It's Jin's birthday after all. Luna came to congratulate him, and with that, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something. She took out the box and presented it to her brother. In this box, there was a pendant with a blue stone in the center. She asked Jin to turn his back for a second while holding the pendant, and after putting the pendant on him, she said that if he was in a desperate situation, he would have to break the blue stone, and when he breaks it, she will come to his aid wherever she is. So she asked Jin never to take off this pendant. Luna leaned a little closer to Jin, a smile on her face, and wished him a happy birthday. Everyone was sitting at the table drinking tea, and the nanny had brought strawberry pie. Luna even managed to spoon-feed Jin like a small child, so it made Jin uncomfortable. Meanwhile, his nanny stood there and watched with a smile as Luna loved her little brother. After all this, Luna said goodbye and said that it was time for her to go. Jin told her to take care of herself and waved goodbye to her as well, now wearing a pendant with a large blue stone. Jin came to Murakhan. Murakhan didn't really have time to say anything before he noticed what was on Jin's next gift was working. She had only heard of the Phoenix Heart, but had never seen its effects in person, and neither had Jin. Jin got this ability because he ate half of the Phoenix Heart, and he planned to eat the other half in a couple of years. Meanwhile, his nanny was already packing up her things and informed him that they were leaving the castle at dawn. When she saw 2 books lying on the table, she asked him if he should take them with him on the journey. Jin said yes, he would read them on the way. The nanny asked him if he could take anything else, to which Jin said no. After packing up his things, she told him that she would also make him a strawberry pie. Jin said that he would like to have a pie and suddenly jumped up and remembered something. He said he'd take a little walk. Jin went to the secret vault and met Murakhan there. He told Murakhan that he was leaving tomorrow. Murakhan said that he had been waiting for this day, but Jin wondered quite logically how he was going to take Murakhan with him. In response, Murakhan replied with a grin that he was a legendary black dragon, and there was no need to panic as a friend. Murakhan started talking about how he was weak, but even that wouldn't stop him from going after Jin without anyone noticing. Jin asked Murakhan why he hadn't said anything about being weak before. It was all because he had been asleep for 1,000 years. Jin asked if Murakhan would be able to regain his strength, but he replied that they would become stronger together. After all, Murakhan is his dragon guardian, so Murakhan told Jin that he was becoming a strong swordsman mage like Tamer. Jin asked Murakhan about the fact that the Runkendell were originally both swordsmen and magicians. He recalled what he had heard from Soldaret in his previous life. Soldaret had told him that their families were swordsmen and magicians. The founder of the Temer Runkendell family was the strongest swordsman mage in history. Apparently, at this time, Everyone forgot about it. Suddenly Murakhan started talking about how Runkendel had rejected magic and was only aiming for swordsmanship because of a humiliating contract made 1,000 years ago. Although Murakhan is revealed, here is the guardian of the family. It is unlikely that anyone will be happy about his return, but if that had happened 1,000 years ago, he and Jin would have been honored for bringing back the world's noblest creature. Jin asked Murakhan if he really thought so. Murakhan thought for a moment, then admitted that it sounded like nonsense. But whatever it was, he would hide well and ask Jin not to worry about it. Jin asked Murakhan what would happen if someone came to the vault and found him missing. Murakhan said that he would cast an illusion using dragon magic. Jin asked what would happen if the illusion was discovered. Murakhan got angry, grabbed Jin's head, and rhetorically asked Jin if he had forgotten that Murakhan was a shadow dragon. Murakhan said that for him to cast an illusion is a mere trifle. But since Murakhan is weakened, this illusion won't last long. Jin was about to leave and thanked Murakhan. Murakhan pointed out that since Jin was grateful, he could have shown more respect. Jin suddenly remembered that he had something for Murakhan. He reached into his bag and pulled out a strawberry pie, as well as the wine he'd stolen. Murakhan was very happy with this offering. After giving him the wine, Jin only asked him not to get drunk so as not to impose some strange illusion. Murakhan couldn't contain his emotions and exclaimed, asking Jin to introduce him to his nanny. And now it was time to leave. Was warned by the nanny not to expect life to be as peaceful as it was inside the walls of Tempest Castle. He may have trained hard at the castle, but now his life will be much more complicated, and she won't be able to make him pie anymore. Jin told her not to worry and that he understood everything and would give it his all. The nanny bowed to him and said that she would also devote herself completely to him. Suddenly someone came up to them and called out to the young master. It turned out to be the Knights of the Guard, Jerome and Holtz. They greeted him. These two knights had to make sure that Jin arrived at the Garden of Swords in one piece. So Jin left the Tempest Castle. As he climbed into the carriage, he was only thinking that he was finally leaving this place. And as so, the carriage drove off. Jin was really waiting to be sent to the Runkendel estate to the Garden of Swords. Jin and his nanny were on their way to the Garden of Swords. It was snowing heavily outside. At this rate, it's going to snow all the way and they'll have to wait it out. In the nearest village, the nanny said that if there was too much snow, they wouldn't be able to teleport. Suddenly, the carriage stopped abruptly. The knights outside reported that it was an ambush and asked them to stay in the carriage. The nanny hugged Jin and said that everything would be fine and asked him not to worry. Jerome and Holtz are 7th ranked knights, and Gilly is with him. From the sounds coming from outside, Gilly could tell that there were about 20 enemies out there. Among them are magic, warriors, and perhaps even archers. But there's hardly anyone above the 7th rank. Suddenly Jin thought of something. He told Gilly to get out of the carriage at once. Gilly didn't understand and asked Jin what he was talking about. Jin said that the guards should not leave a Runkendel child unattended under any circumstances. One of the knights had to stay, Jin said, and suddenly Nanny understood too. This meant that at least one of these knights was a traitor, or an imposter. Jin said something might have been planted in the carriage, so they should leave. Gilly was angry. She said that she would protect Jin and asked him to forgive her if she could not control herself. Slammed her claws down hard and the door shattered into splinters. The snow continued to fall outside. Gilly was carrying Jin in her arms, running with him in her arms. She said that as soon as they arrived at the estate, she would accept the punishment she deserved. Jin said that he needed to go back to the knights because he wanted to make sure of something. When Gilly asked him what he wanted to make sure of, Jin supposed that if the attackers wanted him, they would have attacked him when he got off the carriage, but it was too quiet and suspicious. The nanny listened to Jin and decided to give him a chance to see for himself. When they arrived at the scene and saw a one-eyed red-haired man shouting for his subordinates to find Jin Runkendel, Jin's guess was correct. One of the groups was a group of magicians from the Yuta family, which in turn was part of the Mattel family of magicians. The second group was the mercenaries from the Black King squad. One of the mages spotted Jin's nanny. Their main goal is to protect Jin Runkendel. Suddenly, the red-haired one-eyed man stepped in front of Jin and Gilly, protecting them. He introduced himself. His name is Mareka, and he is the captain of the Black King squad. He came here on the orders of the Runkendels to rescue Jin Runkendels. At the center of the battlefield were the two knights who had promised to bring Jin to the Garden of Swords in one piece. It turned out that they were the ones who dared to attack the young master. They were in a fighting stance and were ready to fight to the last. These 2 knights weren't traitors. They were imposters. If they were truly 7th rank knights, they would have no problem dealing with everyone. The 2 knights were surrounded by the men from the Black King Squad, and the mages from the Yuta family were desperate with despair. Suddenly, Jilly screamed and asked who they were working for and what they needed. Enraged, he said that he would not answer the Runkendal mutt. The nanny asked Jin what she should do. Jin coldly ordered her to kill one of the knights, then cut off the other's hands and bring him. Jilly obeyed the order. She made a sharp lunge towards the knight who had been rude to her. The last thing this knight saw was Jilly's menacing gaze, so she stabbed the knight in the throat and killed him. After finishing the first one, she started moving towards the second, white-haired knight. The knight was terrified, but nevertheless prepared to defend himself. Before he knew it, Jilly had already stabbed him, and he saw his own blood. She knocked him down and chopped off his arm. Then she also mercilessly chopped off his other arm. The knight was terrified and screamed in pain. The seemingly fragile girl ruthlessly defeated her opponents while never doubting her actions. Holding the knight by the hair, she dragged him to Jin's feet. Jin told the knight that some of their patrons had greatly underestimated their opponents. After all, to become a nanny in the Runkendal family, you need to be a warrior of at least the 7th rank. So Jin advised him that if they wanted to kill any of the children, they should send 3 or 4 8th rank knights. Lying on the floor, with 2 arms missing, the knight shouted with all his strength that this was just a warning, and that the rule of the Runkendal would soon come to an end. Jin said that he understood, and that he wanted the same thing, because if the Runkendal rule comes to an end, then Jin Runkendal's rule will begin. The knight raised his head with the last of his strength as he looked at Jin and shouted, "Glory to the great Zippel family." Jin thought about it and remembered what kind of Zippel family it was. Here we are introduced to another famous family. Apart from the Runkendals, there was another strong family that ruled the other half of the world. Unlike the Runkendals, who chase after swordsmanship, this family is honing their magic skills. 1,000 years ago, after the death of the Runkendal founder Tamer, Zippel and the Runkendals made a humiliating pact forbidding the Runkendals from using magic, and all their magical abilities were sealed. The Zippel family has been a sworn enemy of the Runkendal family for 1,000 years, and now it becomes clear what a humiliating contract Murakun was talking about. Jin said that he was wondering who would do such a thing, but these knights were just followers of the Zippels. He told Gilly that they would leave the knight somewhere nearby since there was no point in talking to him. Then the nanny took the knight by the hair and dragged him somewhere. The knight only asked to kill him. Jin stood there thinking that even though the Zippels were sworn enemies of the Runkendal, and still made the Runkendal fearful, they had nothing to do with what had happened that day. It looks like their followers are doing whatever they want. Still, Jin felt that something wasn't quite right. What confused him was that no matter how good the disguise was, it wasn't that easy to trick a 7th star warrior. And then he wondered if that man had helped them. The image of a man in a white shirt and glasses standing with his back turned made it impossible to make out his face. After throwing the knight out somewhere nearby, the nanny informed Jin that she had obeyed his orders. Jin then spoke to the captain of the Black King's squad. He told the captain that he had survived only because they had diverted attention to themselves, and that as soon as Jin arrived at the castle, he would report on how he had helped them. Jin said that he had no doubt that the family would reward the captain handsomely, but for now, he ordered him to take care of the teleportation gate. Suddenly, the captain looked at Jin, standing next to the nanny, and thought that Jin was just a child. But even though he was a Runkendal, wasn't it too early for him to walk around so freely outside the castle? Captain Mareka didn't understand why Jin was so confident, since he was only 10 years old. And then Mareka seriously thought about Jin's words, about establishing the rule of Jin Runkendal are not childish fantasies, and he is completely serious. After some thought, he turned to his subordinates and ordered them to behave while the gate was being prepared for teleportation. He also ordered them not to do anything stupid. The members of the Black King squad didn't understand what the order was at all. They were upset and wondered why they should bother with their behavior at all. Jilly informed Captain Mareka that they were ready to leave. "Then let's go," he said, smiling awkwardly and putting his hand to his heart. The soldiers had never seen the captain behave like this, so they giggled. The captain, nanny, and Jin walked through the snowy mountain, while the rest of the group walked behind. The captain asked, "Is it all right for us to leave those imposters alone?" Jin said that nothing would happen, even if they were found dead or alive. They would serve as a good example to their comrades, and he praised Jilly. They heroes will reach the village in 2 hours, and there they plan to wait out the snowfall. Jin turned to Jilly. He said that she shouldn't blame herself for what happened today, and that even Hand, a knight of the 9th rank, didn't suspect anything. Therefore, it is even harder for her warriors of the 7th rank to notice something. Jilly turned her back on Jin and apologized, feeling ashamed. Jin suddenly remembered that Jilly hadn't changed at all. The fate of every Runkendell nanny is linked to the fate of the child entrusted to her. Jilly had been his nanny in a previous life, so because he didn't have the talent, she was bullied by the other nannies. But she never blamed Jin, and when he was exiled from the family, Jilly was exiled with him. And then she only apologized to him for not being able to serve him properly, as she said while bowing her head. This was how Jin was treated by Jilly in his previous life, so he decided that he wouldn't be too hard on her. The new life is radically different from the past, so Jilly also needs to harden her character. "Young master, I will gladly accept any punishment for what has happened," Jilly said, putting one hand on the other. Suddenly, Jin started yelling at her. He told her to stop blaming herself and that it was in order. Jilly, meanwhile, stood submissively with her head down. Jin said that as long as she was his nanny, she was his only guardian, and if she freaked out over such trifles, it would only cause more problems in the future. He asked her not to be forced to repeat it twice and asked if she was clear. And then Jilly again lowered her gaze and, feeling guilty, promised that she would definitely improve. Jin led the way, a drop of sweat rolling down his face, embarrassed that he had just yelled at his babysitter along the way. Jilly thought that she had no idea that the master was so worried about her. She knew it was all for her own good. Therefore, she was determined to muster her willpower for Jin's safety. After thinking about it, she cheerfully and enthusiastically said that she would give it her all. Finally, the heroes reached the village. The heroes came to the hotel, where they took 2 rooms. Meanwhile, Jin continued to think about what had happened in the imposters, and he assumed that he was probably the one behind it. And here we were, introduced to the same man in glasses and a white shirt. It turns out that he is a magician of transformation, and his name is Bouberet Gaston. Although dragons are also good at transformation, even they are not able to transform perfectly, as they cast an unusual shadow. There is only one Bouberet in the world who can do that with the help of his magic. Dick, he committed far more than one crime, transforming into various people in all, in order to sow chaos around the world. In that case, it was more complicated if Bouberet was really involved, even though he hadn't done anything special yet. And so our hero settled in a hotel. Jin recalled that in his previous life, when he was 20 years old, the Vermont Empire's special branch arrested Bouberet. Jin reasoned that Bouberet might be useful. You just need to poach it. But Jin immediately wondered why you'd want to poach someone who once pointed a sword at you. Already sleepy and yawning, Jin thought that before Bouberet did any more damage, he needed to make sure that nothing had changed from his previous life. Jilly hung up her fur coat, then turned to Jin and told him that she would guard him outside. Jin was already asleep. When she saw that Jin was asleep, she just smiled sweetly and left the room. Suddenly, sounds began to come from somewhere. We see that it is a black cat vigorously wiggling its tail. It was meowing so loudly and insistently that Jin could hear it even in his sleep. Suddenly, Jin woke up, and he didn't know how he fell asleep, even though he had trained a lot in the Castle of Storm. But still, such loads are not suitable for a 10-year-old, he noticed meanwhile. Strange noises continued to come from outside the room. Couldn't just let it go and decided to check out what was going on. He looked out the window and saw a strange black cat standing right behind him. When Jin saw this, he was speechless and surprised at the same time. At that moment, he remembered Murakan's words about hiding well. Jin leaned on the windowsill with one hand and covered his face with the other and said to the black cat that he had promised to follow him without being noticed. Did he mean to turn into a cat? An enraged Murakan in the form of a cat. Continuing to scratch the window, Jin let the cat in and said that he was surprised and didn't expect Murakan to look like this. Jin thought Murakan would turn into one of his servants, like a stable boy. In response, Murakan took on his human form and told Jin that he would have been caught right away if he had done that. Murakan continued to approach the boy, saying that Jin didn't know how hard it had been for him. At that moment, Murakan tripped over a plank sticking out of the wooden floor. Suddenly, he fell with a crash, hit the windowsill on his face, and screamed in pain. Jilly immediately came running to such loud screams. She was agitated and literally rushed into the room, shouting about whether something had happened. There was an awkward pause. Jin was standing awkwardly, smiling and looking at the nanny, while Murakan was squatting next to him and holding his face. Jilly asked Murakan how he dared to pursue the master. She was really angry at him and prepared to attack. She threw Murakan onto the ground and stood over him, threatening to cut him to pieces if he didn't tell her everything. Even though Jilly was Jin Runkendell's nanny, She logically didn't know Murakan by sight, even though she might have heard the legends about him. At this time, Jin, fearing for Murakan, who was already half conscious, hurried to stop her. He told her to stop as he said her name. Murakan remembered something that had to do with Jilly's name. Suddenly he sat up, put one hand to his chest, and the other he held out to Jilly. His eyes were full of love, and his face was flushed, except for the bruise he'd received when he hit the windowsill. Murakan told Jilly that they had finally met while calling her his strawberry pie. Hearing this, Jin felt very ashamed and covered his face with his hand. Murakan told Jilly that he had been waiting for a long time to meet her, thus embarrassing her. Jin only realized that he and Murakan were in trouble. Jin decided to introduce Murakan to the nanny, saying that he was the Runkindle guardian, the black dragon Murakan. But Murakan interrupted him and said that he knew who she was. She is still his strawberry pie. When she found out who Murakan was, she said that she was only a lowly servant in the Runkindle household and apologized for her behavior. She bowed to him and asked him to forgive her. He told her not to worry and that he could never be offended by his strawberry pie. Jilly was confused, and she asked Murakan why he called her that. "Because you are wonderful and beautiful and bake the most delicious strawberry pies," Murakan replied. She thought about it and suddenly realized why the master asked her to make strawberry pies every day. Jin asked the nanny to sit down so he could explain everything. After hearing Jin's entire story, she said that there were a lot of things she didn't know about Master. Jin apologized to Jilly for having to lie to her. Even though Jilly knew that the master had exceptional talent, she couldn't imagine that the master had magic, and she didn't know that he had signed a contract with Solderit, and now he had a dragon with him. She said that as his nanny, she was both shocked and happy. Jin said she was one of them now, and no one else should know about Murakan's awakening and Jin's connection to him, at least not yet. Said she understood. Then Murakan told her not to worry, calling her a strawberry pie because he would always be with Jin. Julie thanked Murakan for his kindness. Suddenly she started talking about that noise. She asked if it was from Murakan's transformation. Then Murakan replied that it wasn't so, and Jin warned him to be careful. Murakan said he just fell. Gilly then went up to Jin and asked him sheepishly if he was sure Murakan could be trusted, to which Jin hesitantly replied, "Yes, you can." At this time, Murakan was laughing as if nothing had happened at the fact that he had fallen. The heroes were standing outside the middle teleportation gate building. The captain of the Black King squad was also standing next to them. They were talking to Jilly, and she said they did a great job addressing the entire Black King squad, and that the Runkindle family would reward them handsomely for their work. The captain thanked her and said that they had learned a lot on this mission, and that he would look forward to seeing her young Runkindle grow up. Jin was also standing next to him. Murakan, in the form of a cat, was sitting on his shoulder. Now he could be next to Jin without anyone noticing. Suddenly the captain turned to the nanny and asked her if it was possible to ask a personal question. Jilly allowed it, and then the captain said she had an amazing talent. So why did she leave her family and become a nanny for young Runkindle? Jilly didn't say much, but after a short pause, she turned her back and said over her shoulder that it didn't matter and nothing was interesting about it. Then the captain realized that it was rude of him and apologized to her. So they said their goodbyes. And so the heroes came to the middle teleportation gate. There they were met by a man who asked them for their identifications. Then Jilly took out the Runkindle family crest. She said they needed to go to Cologne de Hufester to join the Allied forces. He said it was an honor to meet them and asked them to follow him. He said they'd give Jin and Gilly the best seats. This person informed them that they would have to wait 2 hours, but then they would be home in no time and wished them a pleasant trip. Jin and Jilly with Murakan the cat were sitting on a luxurious sofa. Jilly told Jin that she was worried because even if Murakan was discovered, they might be able to get out of it. But what if? And then Jin beat her to it by asking if she was talking about magic. She said that none of the Runkindles are capable of using it. Then Jin smiled and told her not to worry. He knew that himself, so he would hide his magic. Suddenly there was a commotion from somewhere. All 3 of them sitting on the sofa turned around to see what it was. Jin saw this and became alert. Suddenly, a man wearing a green robe with a golden dragon on it walked into the room. It was a guy with purple eyes and long white hair. Behind him were 2 large guards. They were all from the Zippel family, which is a sworn enemy of the Runkindle family. The man sat down across from Jin in silence. Jin was silent, but looking at this man. He tried to remember who it was because this man from the Zippel family looked familiar. Suddenly the guy arrogantly clicked his tongue and said that he didn't want to go to the Hufester, and added after looking at the Runkindles that he hadn't expected to see these drags here. Although the nanny was full of anger, she was still silent, and Jin was as calm as possible and did not give in to provocations. Seeing Murakami as a cat, this man said that the cat was cute. Smiling naively, he called the cat over and called it a good boy, but Murakami mercilessly attacked this guy, scratching his hand. Suddenly, the two men who were next to the boy became alert. They were about to use force, but the boy stopped them and said that everything was fine. This cat was just an animal, and he himself provoked it, and that it is better to keep your swords in the scabbard in front of Runkendals. Suddenly he thought about it and looked at Jin. This boy was trying to hurt them, but he didn't expect them to just ignore him. He noticed that Jin was very reserved. After that, he introduced himself. He said that his name was Verdun Zippel. He apologized for his rudeness, walked over to Jin, and held out his hand. And then Jin exclaimed in his mind. He finally remembered who it was. Verdun Zippel is a genius magician, most likely the next head of the family. He is above all young magician, both in terms of skills and in terms of character. He's the one whose magical abilities Jin considered an unattainable ideal. But Jin didn't think that he would meet him at such a young age. Jin said that he was also curious about what Verdun was like. He's glad Verdun wasn't a complete idiot. Verdun asked how did he asses that. Jin said that if the guards had taken out their blades, Verdun would have gone to Hufester without guards and without a couple of fingers. Verdun laughed and said that even the Runkendal's jokes were cruel. Jin asked if it looked like he was joking, giving Verdun a cold look. Then Verdun thought about it and decided to give Jin some advice. He said that if Jin meets someone else from the Zippel family, then don't rush to cut off someone's fingers because this will add to the problems of both families. To which Jin replied that it was quite funny and that their fathers, Chiron Runkandal and Celiac Zippel, wouldn't start a war over some childish quarrel. Verdun agreed with Jin and said that they would probably compensate for the damage with gold or something. He added that Jin had taught him something and said that he would pay him back later. Jin told him to pay him back right now, to which Verdun asked with a smile what he should do. Jin asked them to keep quiet until the gate was activated and let him rest. Verdun looked at Jin with interest and thought that he would become somewhat amazing in a couple of years. But despite Verdun's interest in Jin, they can't make friends with him because of their background. But Verdun was also happy that they might become sworn enemies. Looking at the behavior of Verdun, who had already annoyed him, thought that the Zippels were not all right in the head. Suddenly, a voice came over the loudspeaker thanking them for waiting and telling them that teleportation was about to begin. Before teleporting, Verdun called out Jin's name and said that it was nice to meet him and would look forward to the next meeting. Jin, on the other hand, showed no sympathy and said that he hoped that their meeting would never come. And so the main characters came to the castle by carriage. As soon as they got off the carriage, they were immediately met by the butler. He introduced himself as Petro, the second manager of the house. It must have been hard to get here, Petro said. He said he would welcome them to the main castle of the Runkendals and the Garden of Swords. And so the main character found himself in the Garden of Swords, in the main castle of the Runkendal. The Garden of Swords is where those who have contributed to the prosperity of the Runkendal family can leave their sword. Thus, this garden is a symbol of the hopes and honor of every Runkendal. Walking along the Garden of Swords, the hero talks about how he once hoped that after his death, his sword would be placed here in the garden. He remembers that in the past he was weak, deprived of potential. He was never a leader. He didn't know why he'd ever thought that hard training would make a difference. But now, as far as Jin was concerned, his life in this worthless place would make sense. So Jin entered the castle. There he was met by his father and other members of the Runkendal family. He was first greeted by his mother, Rose Runkendal, the first lady of the Runkendal house, who goes by the nickname Black Panther. Jin also greeted his mother in return. Murakami and Chiron suddenly locked eyes. Chiron's gaze wasn't gracious at all, and his face was sullen. Jin's father asked him what kind of cat was on his shoulder and where he had picked it up. The boy replied that he had taken him in. Chiron emphasized the difference between picked up and sheltered and said it was good that Jin could choose his words, because that's how a real Runkendal should respond. At the same time, all of Jin's siblings in the room were looking at him with hatred because of his father's praise. The cat jumped off Jin's shoulder and ran to his mother. His mother rose while petting the cat and asked what his name was. Jin replied that his name was Moth Runkendal. Hearing this, Jin's older brothers were outraged. One of them began to appeal to his father and mother, saying that this should not be allowed to get away with it. You cannot give an insignificant animal their last name. Then he turned to Jilly and asked how she'd raised Jin in the first place. But then his father interrupted him. He asked Jin why his son had given the cat the name Runkendel. Jin replied that he did it to be responsible. He said that maybe it's just a cat, but it's the first time he sheltered someone, and if so, then the name should be meaningful. Murakhan in his cat form just looked at Jin happily. Jin's father, Chiron, found this very funny and asked him if he understood the significance of their last name since he was talking about it. Jin replied that he understood and said while holding the cat in his arms that if someone hurt them off, he would pay for it. Chiron commented on Jin's words, noting that the boy has a talent for making enemies. Meanwhile, Jin's siblings were looking at him with angry eyes. Jin said that apparently he really has this talent, but he also has a talent for getting rid of enemies. We see Chiron smile broadly at this and say that his siblings should be more careful if they decide to deal with this cheeky kid. 4 years have passed since Jin came to the main castle of Runkendel. We see Jin standing with a wooden sword in his hands. He was training in fencing at the moment. Jin Runkendel is a 14-year-old knight of the 2nd rank, also a cadet. We see him standing with his fencing coach. The coach said that it was time to finish training and that Jin had done a good job. Asked if that meant there would only be a morning workout. Coach Jin's name is Garen Altamir, and he is the guardian of House Runkendel, a knight who trains low Runkendelsg cadets. He reminded Jin that young Lady Luna was planning to train him. Jin remembered this and decided that in that case, he should have a bite to eat. So he put the wooden sword back in its place and went to eat. Before he left, Garen asked him if he would have lunch with the cadets again, and he said that Madame Rose would be upset. Jin sighed heavily and said that it couldn't be helped because he didn't want to play peekaboo with his siblings over the food. Garen expressed his understanding and said that he would inform the lady. Jin was sitting on the stairs when suddenly a guy came up to him. He called Jin master and said that he had brought food. This guy is Belop Schmitz, guardian of the House of Runkendel, a low Runkendelsg knight cadet. Jin thanked him for the meal. Belop sat down next to him, and they both started eating. Belop was an ordinary commoner, 13 years old. In his previous life, because of his lack of training, he was stripped of his rank and banished, and it was clear from Jin's look that he felt sorry for Belop. Jin then asked him if it was good for him, and Belop just smiled awkwardly. After that, we see what kind of speech Belop made. He said it was really delicious. He's very grateful to the Runkendel family for being able to eat such wonderful meat. He's especially grateful to the young master because Jin is always ready to share meat with him. Jin was embarrassed and asked Belop to stop. Jin said that Belop said the same thing yesterday, and then asked if he knew it by heart. Belop scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. Then Jin told him that he should be more careful because of what Belop says. What's on his mind? Everyone looks down on him. Philip really looked simple and seemed very naive. Jin continued to give him advice and told Belop to straighten his shoulders, hold his head higher, and become at least a little more confident. He reminded Belop that he was a Runkendel Knight cadet. Then Belop confusedly said that his grades were terrible, and he hadn't even reached the 1st rank. Jin sighed heavily and reassured him that even becoming a cadet wasn't easy. No matter how bad Belop's grades are, he's still better than his peers who didn't make it here, Jin said. Jin watched Belop eat and thought that he was so pure and sincere. Jin thought that his relatives were bullying him, but at the same time, he couldn't understand something. How did someone so pure, trained by Swordmaster Hiron, become a loyal dog of the Vermont Empire and turned into a ruthless killer? When Jin found out that Belop had become an imperial bodyguard, Jin was shocked, and when Jin found out that he had committed suicide, the master was upset. So Jin couldn't afford to leave Belop because then who knows what would happen to him. Jin then shared a piece of meat with Belop. Belop was happy even for such a seemingly trivial matter. Jin was personally going to make sure that Belop wasn't kicked out this time. He wouldn't repeat his past life mistakes again. Jin has reached 2nd rank Shadow Energy Release, 4th ranked Mana, and 2nd ranked Swordsmanship. Everything is not going badly at this rate. Jin plans to reach the 3rd rank in Swordsmanship, and we see that Jin has come to the training room. Luna was already waiting for him there. She said that today they will continue yesterday's training. However, this time it will be a little different, Luna said. She said the phrase that the heart is your eyes. She told him to look with your heart. Jin obeyed and did what Luna said. He was embarrassed because he had never heard of such training, but he had no choice. Luna explained that for those who live in fencing, it is extremely important to open their inner vision. She told him not to open his eyes. Standing with his eyes closed, Jin thought that only knights who have reached the 7th rank can comprehend inner vision, and Luna wants to train someone who is only 2nd rank. In addition, inner vision is usually achieved by dispelling the aura, but during training with Luna, Jin can't use his aura yet. He decided to trust her, so he continued to do what she told him and focus on his training. He firmly believed that one day he would understand how to do it, and now we see that the training session has already come to an end. Luna praised Jin, saying that he was doing great as always, and that he could come back again. Jin was grateful for what she was doing after training. Luna thought that as she expected, he was doing well, but each time he exceeded her expectations. Jin shows a concentration that is not typical of a second-ranked knight. Luna is sure that with such potential, he will understand everything in a couple of years, and wished only for him to keep growing. We are transported to the open courtyard in the castle where all the cadets are already standing, and they are lined up in a row. Jin went there and was greeted by Coach Garen. Jin glanced at the cadets and said they were nervous. Garen replied that today was a crucial sparring session. If the cadets get a good grade, they will become a Night Guardian faster. It's hard not to be nervous, Garen said. Then turning to Jin, he said that today was also an important day for the master. According to Garen, Rose said that if Jin defeated 10 higher-ranked opponents, he would be able to start training in the advanced group starting next year. Then Jin saw Bellup among the cadets, who was shaking with fear. Jin thinks about doing something to keep Bellup from getting kicked out, but Bellup still lacks confidence. It was time for Coach Garen to announce to the cadets that today they would take turns fighting 3 opponents, and the top 10 would face Jin one-on-one. The cadets understood the command, and now we see that they are already fighting. Coach Garen watched the fights of the cadets and commented on one of the fights, saying that it was very good and the training did not pay off in vain. There were 3 cadets left on the bench who were not selected, and Garen told them that they could sit back down. And we see the following picture. Garen tells Jin to get ready, and so he quickly delivers a crushing blow to his opponent, which knocks her sword out of her hands. Jin won in just 1 blow, standing over the defeated opponent. He recalled that the record was 8 defeated opponents. Right now, he only needs 2 more wins to surpass it, but as it is clear from his words, he was wary of one of the rivals. At the same time, Garen called out to the next opponent, and then the girl he'd been wary of came out. This girl's name is Mesa Milcano. She is a Knight Cadet of House Run Candles from the normal group. She was one of the few people who would become a Night Guardian after completing her training. When she came out to fight, she told Jin that she would beat him today no matter what the cost. Jin replied that he was looking forward to it, but in his mind, the battle with her was the most important moment in the trial. After exchanging a few words, they began to fight. Mesa immediately took off and threw a punch at Jin, but he managed to block it. Jin thought back to his previous life. He noticed that Mesa was even stronger than before, but it wasn't enough to defeat the current Jin. Still, Jin knew that he would have to fight 8 more after her, so he started attacking Mesa with simple punches. She noticed that he had previously demonstrated a wide variety of techniques. She was sure there was a reason, but she couldn't figure it out. Or, as she thought, he was underestimating her because he didn't think she could win. At that moment, Jin attacked Mesa. She still chose to think that he underestimated her. Firmly gripping her sword, she fiercely attacked Jin. In return, she wanted to show him that she shouldn't be underestimated. The cadets standing to the side could only watch this battle in surprise. Jin, meanwhile, kept up the pressure, and we see Mesa not wanting to let Jin push her aside and wanting to surpass him. She pounces on him, swinging her sword wide, and then her strike reaches Jin's sword. The moment their swords came together, Mesa's sword couldn't withstand Jin's precise strike in the middle, so the other half of Mesa's sword flew out of the way. Mesa was confused and she didn't understand what had happened, or how her sword had broken. As a sign of his victory, Jin held a wooden sword to her throat. He told her it was a good fight. Then Jin looked at the sword and said that it was useless now. Suddenly, Mesa realized that Jin had been hitting the same spot all along. She thought that even though their strength and stamina were the same, she would never be able to beat him in accuracy and perseverance, since Jin was a Run Candle son after all. After thinking about everything, she turned to Jin and said that she would devote herself to training completely and would definitely win. Everything was going according to plan. It was hard for Jin to fight the others in this state because of Mesa's crushing defeat. The other cadets were sure beforehand that they couldn't beat Jin. And now we see that the challenge is over. Jin won all 10 opponents. Jin was glad that everything went as he expected. Coach Garen told Jin that it was amazing and added the following. Starting next year, Jin will be trained by real Run Candles. And then Garen congratulated him. Jin thanked Garen, and he was counting on him. It was almost time for the morning training session to end, and Garen wanted of it and go to lunch. But Jin wanted to take on another cadet in the 10 minutes that remained. He picked up his sword, and when Garen asked him who Jin wanted to fight, Jin loudly called out the name Belop Schmitz. Belop was confused and afraid. Even the cadets standing nearby were scared. Jin told Belop to fight. Belop was very scared. He tried to object, but then Jin shouted his name again. He pointed his sword at Belop and said that he couldn't survive in the Runkendal family like this. He ordered Belop to come forward and fight and threatened to destroy him. And then we see a picture of Belop walking unsteadily towards Jin. Belop was standing in front of Jin, holding a sword. He didn't understand why the master had chosen him. It was only because Belop was weak, and Jin wanted to teach him military discipline. Jin looked at Belop seriously and told him that he was quite tired from all the fighting while Belop was full of energy. But he was still stronger, so Jin called Belop. Belop couldn't understand the master. Right after saying that to Belop, Jin charged him, and he hit Belop. Belop asked why Jin was doing this. Jin continued to attack. Belop's shouts rang out when Belop blocked another shot from Jin. Jin came up and said that he was blocking well. After that punch, Jin jumped back. Then he threw dust in Belop's eyes. I started attacking. While he couldn't see anything, Jin swung down and knocked Belop off his feet. Belop's eyes filled with tears and he was in pain. Standing over Belop, Jin said that he could have killed him. He ordered him to get up and that he would not spare him again. Meanwhile, the cadets continued to watch in horror. Suddenly, Belop began to rise and the golden aura began to radiate from him. The cadets noticed this, and it turned out that Belop was using aura. Belop was crying, but there was also anger on his face and a yellow gold aura enveloped him. Mesa told Garen that he needed to stop this right away, because if this continued, Jin might get hurt. The trainer was in shock. He was watching the fight closely, so he didn't hear what Mesa was shouting. Jin ordered Coach Garen that whatever he saw now, he would take with him to the grave. Garen said he understood, and Mesa was shocked. Belop then asked if this was what Jin wanted. He replied that this was exactly the case. Jin told Belop not to hold back if he knew how to use aura. Belop bared his teeth and said that Jin had made a terrible mistake if he wanted to fight him, and that he shouldn't have left him for last. With that, Belop attacked Jin, and now we see that their swords collided. Jin blocked Belop's attack, but his sword didn't hold. Belop broke Jin's sword in two with a single blow. Jin, meanwhile, was thinking that he knew that Belop was strong, but he didn't think that he was that strong. During training sessions, always managed to understand the opponent's strategy and assess their skills, and then deliberately lost. But Jin would never have thought that Belop already had an aura. Jin was speechless. Jin's sword was broken, leaving him unarmed. Then he decided to fight with a different weapon, namely with his hands. He hit Belop's arm while he was swinging his sword. With that blow, Jin knocked the sword out of Belop's hands. Suddenly, Jin approached him and grabbed him. Belop was also left without a sword, and Jin knocked him down and took a chokehold. Jin held Belop and waited for him to give up, but he didn't give up, so Jin let him go. Belop is exhausted on the floor. As Jin approached, Belop, holding his throat and standing on all fours, asked Jin why he stopped. Because Jin wanted a decent fight, and said that it wasn't necessary to fight to the end. He asked Jin if he really enjoyed bullying people that much. Jin replied that he didn't. Belop countered by asking why Jin had arranged all this. Jin replied that he didn't want to provoke Belop. All of a sudden, Jin got down on one knee in front of Belop. To be kind and caring, you need to be strong. Belop is weaker than Jin, but kinder at the same time. Putting his hand on Belop's shoulder, he said that he liked that about Belop, but the good cannot survive in this hell. Jin then asked Belop to become stronger so that he could protect the good within him. Jin apologized to him for being rude. Then Belop burst into tears. At this time, the servants of the palace came with food. They asked if the training was going on and if they should come back later. Jin replied that everything was fine and told them to bring in the food. Belop was still sitting on the floor, wiping away his tears, and he had told the master to go to lunch. Jin smiled and said that he would take a portion for Belop as well. And we are transported to another location. We see that Chiron is sitting on the floor, and Khan is standing next to him. After Chiron listened to Khan, he asked him if the younger one really said that. Khan confirmed it. Then Chiron laughed out loud and said the following sentence. So that's what his beliefs are. Jin wants to rule the strong and help the weak. Chiron said that in this case, it is necessary to understand whether such an approach is beneficial to the Runkendal family. He ordered Khan to go back and bring Jin over, and he said it was time for Junior to go on his first assignment. The first vacation started. The cadets either left for their hometowns and villages or stayed to continue their individual training sessions. When cadets advance to the advanced group, they can forget about wooden swords, and they will be given a custom-made sword. Some of the cadets had already given the blacksmiths instructions regarding their swords. Jin thinks that he also wants to find a suitable sword in their armory. But Luna would choose his sword. It turns out that a month ago, Luna tried to persuade Jin to let her choose his own sword, but Jin didn't mind because Luna is a better swordsman, so he just had to trust her. And so Luna showed the sword she had chosen. Jin clearly didn't like this sword. It was her sword. Luna said that this sword is called Veil Slayer. At Jin's age, she'd used it a lot herself. Back then, she wanted to use something like a sword axe with a similar shape. She asked Jin if he liked the sword. Jin didn't know what to say. After collecting his thoughts, he said that he was grateful for her help in choosing a sword, but it was unlikely that such a sword would be suitable for him. Then she was disappointed and said that she was just joking, but Jin knew she didn't. Luna then tried to talk Jin out of it, telling him that Veil Slayer was a really good sword, even if it was a little heavy. Then Luna saw his expression and understood. She said that she understood him and so be it. With another sword, Jin let out a sigh of relief. Luna opened the doors of the armory and said that she really tried her best when choosing it. She was thinking about which sword would suit Jin best, which sword would suit only him. And then she took the sword in her hands and said that she had thought of him since Jin had chosen Barasada at the selection ceremony. This sword would suit him best. Jin was pleasantly surprised. He recognized this sword. This sword is called the brother of the Barasada, which belonged to the founder. This sword is called Bradamante. Jin was thrilled, and Luna said he seemed to like the sword. This sword is unique. Even the other swords from the family collection can't compare to it. Jin said that he would have done anything to get that sword, and was delighted that Luna had chosen Bradamante for him. Bradamante and Barasada are best compatible with shadow energy. If Jin had chosen it himself, then his siblings would have objected. Then Jin said that the others wanted Bradamante too, and he didn't even know how to thank her. Hearing this, Luna told him that something didn't add up, and she thought he was still uncomfortable with her. This started to upset Luna. Jin quickly retorted and told her that it wasn't true at all, and that he wasn't lying to her. She said that she was already upset, so he would have to comfort her. After that, they started training. Luna asked him to remember something else. She said that among all the brothers and sisters who tried to trample on each other, there are also those who selflessly love him, and once again asked him to remember this well. Then she took him by the shoulders and told him not to upset her again. Luna said that she had already spent enough time alone, long before Jin was born, and that she didn't want him to be alone like she once was. When he returned from training, he immediately showed the sword to Murakhan. Murakhan, without distracting himself from the comics, told him to put the sword away. It's too early for him because he didn't master the shadow energy enough. He explained that to properly use Bradamante, shadow energy must be at least rank 3, and Jin is still a brat with the 2nd rank. Besides, Murakhan said that Jin wouldn't even be able to awaken the sword, but Jin didn't listen and believed that he would soon reach the 3rd rank and be able to use Bradamante. And suddenly, Murakhan made a remark to Jin and told him to listen carefully. Murakhan took Jin by the head and told him that Barasada and Bradamante couldn't be used randomly. They needed 3rd rank shadow energy, and that was the bare minimum. He ordered Jin to use a normal sword until his strength reached the 5th rank. Jin retorted that he didn't like waiting too long, and that he only needed to reach rank 5 in a year. Murakhan frowned, then said that it was impossible, even if Jin won the shadow contest. Murakhan ridiculed Jin's plans, saying that it was nonsense, and asked him not to talk such nonsense anymore. Jin was annoyed, so he picked up the comic book like he was going to tear it up and asked Murakhan what he was saying. Suddenly, Jilly came into the room and asked if everything was all right. She then informed him that Coach Garen was calling for him. Jin was asked to come himself because Garen had to explain the strategy to him and show him everything on the map. Jin asked what strategy he was talking about, said that Coach Garen would be helping him with his first assignment, and that Jin would move out as soon as he was rested. Jin said that it was a good time for the mission, since he had recently been awarded the 3rd rank, but it was strange that they were moving out after the test ended. He came to the conclusion that perhaps this is due to the complexity of the task, because they are usually assigned to an advanced rank or higher. Jin said that he probably already proved himself worthy. He went to the coach and asked Jilly to wait there with Murakhan. Jin opened the door and went into the office. He told Garen that he had come for a mission, and then Garen began to explain the strategy to them. The cadets will be divided into 2 groups. This is a search task to find the heir of the Jin Kingdom. They will go to the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. It was quite a dangerous place because this kingdom is not far from the land of monsters, as well as from the base of the Flame White Wolf. They shouldn't send Lo Runkendel's cadets to this place, Jin thought. He noticed something was wrong because this was quite difficult for the first task, and it was issued earlier than it should have been. The cadets were given a map and instructions for the squad members, and then everyone was shocked. The squad included cadets with average scores and even Belop, whose grades were constantly fluctuating. It looked like someone had deliberately set it up. Jin knew that someone was his father. He realized that his father might have been informed of their battle with Belop and that Chiron had decided to test Jin in this way. Jin was very serious. He accepted these conditions and was determined to show his father what he could do because his beliefs were unshakable. We are being moved forward 3 days and the cadets are already at the southern border of the Jin Kingdom. In order to complete the mission, they must find Summer Will, the heir of the Will family from the Jin Kingdom. According to their plan, they will set up camp in the central section of the border, and after that, each squad will go on a search. They also decided that every day at the designated time, a selected person from each squad would come to the camp to share information with the others. Jin ordered everyone to call him the commander and said that the injured should stay in the camp until they fully recovered. When everyone stopped, one of the party members said that they had noticed a monster from the Watertail tribe. These monsters from the Watertail tribe are cute creatures that avoid predators, which means they won't run into the White Wolf tribe right now. Jin had ordered what appeared to be Belop to go to camp and then return to Sector 13. He ordered the rest of the team to start searching Sector 13. Jin had a bad feeling that his father had personally assigned them to this mission, but everything was going too smoothly. Jin allowed for the possibility that he had misunderstood everything, and this was just an assignment, not a test from Chiron. And we see that a bunch of cute little creatures have come up to the cadets. One of the Tail tribe monsters said that they felt sorry for the guys and gave Jin a fried fish, accepted the gift, and thanked him, promising to repay his kindness later. The hero carefully considered his plan of action. After Sector 13, the Land of the Beastmen begins, and the cadets from the normal group are no match for them. Therefore, they should not strain too much for the sake of results. For the next 3 days, Jin will only confirm the search results in each of the sectors. And suddenly, we see someone running towards Jin. It turned out to be Belop. He informed Jin that the second squad was ambushed. The cadets were frightened. Jin ordered the cadets to prepare to move out and Belop to report the situation. Belop reported that the second squad had spread out to get away from the enemy, and only one had been able to reach the camp and report what had happened. Jin started questioning Belop, and we find out that the ambush was set up by ordinary people. There were 3 of them. Belop said, "Why would anyone attack the Runkendels with such a small force?" Jin agreed and said that he was sure there were many more of them. He then ordered Eddington and David to return to the camp to guard it in the surrounding area. He told them that it was forbidden to make contact with the enemy when detected. He ordered them to report to him first if anything happened. Jin thought about how many people might have set up the ambush, but he couldn't even guess what their goal was or why they were attacking the second squad instead of the first, which included Jin himself. He doesn't know who they are, but he is determined to personally make them pay for daring to touch the Runkendels. Suddenly, Jin motioned for the group to stop. Footprints and blood on the snow. Belop was horrified when he saw this, and he didn't want to think about the possibility that Mesa and the entire second squad might be dead. Jin reassured him that the blood was still fresh. After examining the place, he said that there were no signs of falling or pieces of flesh. He added that they fought here, but the second group escaped. Judging by the tracks, they were only attacked by one person. Suddenly, Sierra, one of the group members, found a bandage made in Hufester, where the cadets came from. She said she found them on the west side. In his mind, a rough outline of the squad's movement. While the second squad was dressing the wounded man, someone else attacked and they had to flee to the west. Jin then ordered Sierra to go to Eddington and David's camp and explain everything to them, and ordered Belop to follow him. They stopped and hid behind the birches. They saw the second squad, but Mesa wasn't with them, and the cadets themselves were guarded by all 3 of them. Jin ordered Belop to close his eyes briefly and attack the one on the left in 2 seconds. Jin took out a knife and started using shadow energy on it. It turns out that Murakun taught the hero to use the energy of shadows in such a way as to increase the sharpness and destructive power of the object, so the knife was more difficult to notice. Jin then threw a knife at one of the attackers. One of the squad members killed one of the guards. The third one was attacked by Belop, but the guard noticed him and blocked his attack. Suddenly, Jin arrived from the other side and threw a punch at him. The guard fell screaming in pain. Jin stood over him and asked if everyone was safe. The battered members of the second squad said that they were fine, but Mesa was a prisoner. They said that they were not forgiven for this. Jin told them to take care of themselves first. Jin was standing over one of the guards, the guard begging for mercy, but Jin said that for a Zippel follower, he valued his life too much. Jin decided to give him a choice. If the guard tells you who they are, what their purpose is, and where the base is, then only he will die or else. If he kept his mouth shut, Jin would kill not only the guard, but also his loved ones. He said that he would keep his promise because he is Jin Runkendals, and then he swore on the honor of his family. The guard chose the first option. He said that they are a group of revolutionaries, Kinzello, a terrorist organization that was active just before Jin's death. The world was filled with panic when they killed a bunch of people in Jin's kingdom. They call themselves revolutionaries, and revolution is for them to overthrow kings and put their own king in charge of the whole world. The hero asked the guards if they wanted to cause trouble in the Jin kingdom by killing the Runkendal cadets. The guard replied that he didn't know where the main base was, but his group was located right near the Beastman lands. There are about 24th ranked warriors and mages. Jin then asked one last question. He asked why they had taken Mesa. The guard replied that it was just for the sake of propaganda to promote the revolution. They were ordered to take all the girls alive. Then one of the members of the group, being enraged, said that they were just scum, and we see Jin taking the sword and saying that he will keep his promise. After killing the guard, Jin asked the squad members how long it had been since Mesa disappeared, and they said that it had been about an hour. This meant that they were already close to their campsite. Jin ordered the group to give everyone first aid and request backup. One of the cadets asked Jin if he was going to go alone. Jin had a reasonable assessment of his own strength, and he knew that there were 24th ranked men out there. And the cadet was right. It was too dangerous to go alone. Scott said that they were only cadets, and that cadets often died during missions. So he asked Jin not to take any chances. But the hero was determined. He said that once one of them was captured, Runkendals couldn't leave him. Jin said that he was stronger than the cadets thought, and that any objections would be considered insubordination, and then turned to Bellop and he said that all the members of the second squad were injured, so he is the strongest among them. Jin hurried over to Mesa, wanting to be in time before they did something terrible to her. As Jin ran, he assessed the situation. His swordsmanship and energy are ranked 3rd, and his magic is ranked 4th. He's growing quite fast, but now he can't cope with all of them at once. The main thing for him was to save Mesa, so he decided that he would try to avoid fighting. He focused on the search and cast an exploration spell, and then the wind tracking spell. A green line pointed him towards them and he ran. While Jin was running, he was attacked. Several revolutionaries and mages charged out of the bushes. He used magic to kill one of them. An enraged revolutionary with a sword attacked Jin, but Jin swiftly drew his Bradamante sword and repelled the attack, and we see that the magician began to cast fire magic and warn the warriors to move back. Suddenly, with the help of fire magic, he grabbed Jin's hand with something that looked like a fire whip. Seeing this, one of the warriors decided that this was the most convenient moment to attack, since Jin was being held by a mage. But Jin beat him to it and hit him right in the stomach with his sword. The mage was holding Jin with a flaming whip, but suddenly Jin pulled on it and dispelled the magic. The mage was confused and didn't understand why his fire magic didn't work on Jin. The mage then started using ice magic, but that didn't bother Jin either. The mage couldn't believe his eyes. He stood there in horror, trying to figure out what was wrong with his magic. Jin threw a punch, and there was blood splattering everywhere. Jin called them the Kinzello. He suggested that perhaps they are not trying to hide, because they expect that the opponents do not have combat experience. He saw the tracks and realized that the others had left in a cart. Kinzello has its own hierarchy, and Jin guessed that they probably split their loot according to their position in the group. This means that they will not dare to touch the share of the one who is more important, which means that there is still a chance to save Mesa. Jin took a look at the map. He said that he was already close to the Beastman lands, and Kinzello base was somewhere nearby, and then he decided to distract them. He used fire magic, then he set fire to the forest and started a big fire. It was part of his plan. The Kinzellos noticed that there was a fire. Everyone ran outside and went to put out the fire. Jin surreptitiously observed this. One of the revolutionaries began to command. He ordered the magicians to use water or ice magic. Jin thought that he was the boss. The boss shouted that the fire couldn't have started in this weather and said that it was definitely set by someone. Just as he started giving the order to find the instigator, Jin was already standing behind him. Suddenly, the boss turned around after hearing something, but Jin silently knocked him down. There was so much thick smoke from the fire that Jin and the revolutionary boss couldn't be seen on the roof. After knocking out the boss of the revolutionaries, he found the keys. Then we see him open the door to a certain room. There he started looking for Mesa. He saw that there was a basement. Jin has found a tied-up Mesa. She asked why he came. It's dangerous here. Jin told her not to worry about him and asked if she could walk. She said she could, but she didn't think she could run, so Jin released her. Suddenly, they heard strange noises. Suddenly, Mesa asked Jin to promise her something. She asked him to leave her if he was in danger. She couldn't let Jin get hurt. Then he just held her up and said that we need to leave and that it's dangerous here. When they went outside, they saw that all the revolutionaries were killed and everything around them was destroyed. When he saw the claw marks on the revolutionaries, he realized that it was the beastmen from the warrior tribe. We can see that Jin and Mesa are looking somewhere else, and it's clear from the look in Mesa's eyes that she's obviously not happy. Then we are shown a shadow whose silhouette looks like a wolf. After that, we see a hand that is covered with fur and holds a weapon, and here we see a beastman from the White Wolf tribe. This beastman was huge, and he was holding something that looked like a hammer axe in his hands. Mesa said she would distract him and asked him to run, but Jin knocked her out with a blow to the neck and she fell unconscious. At that moment, the beastman clicked his tongue and said that they were all useless and were of no use because they couldn't even put out a fire. Then he turned to Jin and asked if it was all his fault. Jin replied that this was true and introduced himself, saying that he was the son of Chiron Runkendel, Jin Runkendel, and the next picture opens up. The beastman was much larger than Jin, and he was also very angry. Jin was fearless. He ordered the beastman to give his name. Hearing that Jin was a Runkendel, the wolf simultaneously bared its teeth, apparently having a grudge against the Runkendel. All of a sudden, we are transported to the events a few days before the start of the search mission to the Runkendel house. We see that he is holding his Bradamante sword and the energy of shadows begins to radiate from it. Suddenly, Murakhan appeared out of nowhere and interrupted Jin by kicking him. Murakhan was angry. He told Jin that Jin might die. Murakhan warned him. He also said that Jin wasn't ready yet and that if Jin tried to awaken the sword again, the shadow energy would poison him. He warned Jin that if he didn't want to die from too much shadow energy, he shouldn't even think about awakening the sword. And so we are transported back to the present. We see that the beastman is shouting at Jin, calling him Runkendel. He said he was going to have a better hunt today. The wolf introduced himself and said that his name was Quajito Truca. He was a warrior of the Truca family. He was from the White Wolf tribe. This tribe is made for battle and slaughter. Adult White Wolf is at least a rank 6 warrior. Everyone knows that the White Wolf tribe doesn't like Runkendels because a long time ago the founder of the Runkendel family called their god, the great white wolf Javier, to him and killed him. Jin knew that he couldn't escape with Mesa. Quajito screamed that he would sacrifice Jin to Javier so that his soul could rest in peace. Quajito gave Jin a choice and said either they fight in a fair duel or the wolf would tear him to pieces, while Jin runs away with his tail between his legs. Jin took a stance and said that he was choosing a fair fight. Quajito started the attack while he attacked. He said that the choice of Jin meant that the Runkendels were not deprived of nobility and that they let the strongest win. He hit Jin with his axe, but Jin managed to jump out of the way. But the wolf didn't stop and immediately launched a second attack. Jin blocked this attack, but he no longer had the strength to block its attacks. They exchanged blows again. However, Jin estimated that he could still win. He has an ace up his sleeve that Quajito doesn't even know about, a pendant given by Luna in the energy of shadows. But Jin isn't sure if it is worth wasting the pendant on such a threat. If Jin couldn't handle such an opponent, then he didn't have a chance to become stronger, he thought. However, in addition to all this, Jin couldn't use magic since his 4th ranked magic wouldn't even leave a scratch on a wolf. If the Guardian Knight is sent to investigate Conzello, he will immediately see traces of mana, and then Jin will definitely be discovered and expelled from the family. And so after thinking about it, Jin came to the conclusion that there was no other choice, and he would have to use the energy of the shadows. The wolf continued to press, while Jin continued to block and dodge the attacks, pushing Jin back. The wolf said that he had a good sword, but for some reason, it wasn't black like the famous Runkendel swords. After that, the wolf rushed at Jin swinging his axe and said that Jin was stronger than he looked, but Jin managed to dodge, tried to remember what it felt like when he tried to awaken the sword. The wolf meanwhile continued to bully Jin. He said that he was finished, and he would sacrifice both Jin and his white sword to Javier. When Jin was already at the peak of his emotions, he remembered. What we can see is that shadows have formed around Quajito and Jin. The wolf could not understand what was happening. Everything was dark in his eyes. He said that he could not see anything. Suddenly, Jin threw a punch at Quajito's stomach area. Jin's sword blade was shrouded in shadow energy, and the wolf now understood why the Runkendel were famous for their black swords. Wolf was killed without understanding how Jin managed it. Jin just said it was a good fight. Suddenly, his eyes filled with shadow energy. Jin was screaming in pain. It looked like what Murakami had said had happened. Suddenly, Jin collapsed on the ground. He was in a place where everyone was calling him names, calling him a jerk and a disgrace to his family. This place was filled with shadow energy. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of him. It was Murakami, and he reminded Jin of what he had said about what would happen if Jin decided to awaken the sword. While he didn't have enough energy, he said that he would have to pay the price. Murakami asked Jin how much longer he would lie in the mud poisoned by shadow energy, and then told him to get up because if Jin lost, it would all be over. Murakami asked Jin if he still didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Jin remembered to release the energy of the shadows. The shadow energy surrounding Jin was destroying everything, but he wasn't going to give up. He relaxed, and then after a couple of tries, he finally succeeded. He let out a sigh of relief. He noticed that the pain was suddenly gone, which seemed too strange. His body didn't change at all, but he was filled with the energy of the shadows. He could still move, so he decided it was time to pick up Mesa and leave. Then he suddenly heard a noise behind the rocks. He asked who was there. A guy poked his head out, terrified, and begged not to kill him. Jin thought the man was from Kinsalo. The man said that he was Semberville from the Gene Kingdom. Jin introduced himself and said that he was sent to find Sember, and he was crying with happiness. Jin forgets about him because of Kinsalo. Then we see Jin take Mesa away. She said she would never forget his kindness. Jin replied that it was nothing. After taking Mesa, Jin asked Sember how it was that he was kidnapped by Kinsalo. Sember said that he was following his beloved. Jin asked if they really decided to run away together. Sember got nervous and said it was because she had died 2 years ago. But her face, her voice, and even the 2 moles on her arm are exactly the same as when she was alive. Jin immediately thought that since it was an exact replica, it must have been Buburi handiwork. He supposed they probably wanted to kidnap Sember for the money, but he couldn't figure out if there was any connection between Buburi and Kinsalo. The last time Jin encountered Buburi was when he was 10, and here he was again. Jin suspected something was wrong. He was thinking about meeting Buburi and finding out what kind of person he was. Fortunately for Jin, Buburi's lair is located in the Kurano Principality, and when he moved to the advanced group, he will definitely stop by. Jin said that reinforcements will be arriving soon, so it's time to head back. When Sember heard this, he burst into tears because Jin had summoned the Guardian Knights for his sake, but it was actually for Mesa's sake. Sember said that he would never forget their meeting, and that if Jin ever needed his help, he would just let him know. But Jin only responded coldly. We see that the heroes have returned, and Jin is met by the nanny. She was very happy and congratulated him on the successful completion of the task. She said that Jin was probably tired, so she prepared a bath for him. Jin was happy and was thanking Jilly when suddenly the cat in the back called Jin over. Jin pretended as if nothing had happened, walked up to Murakami, and decided to pet him, asking if he was behaving well. But Murakami the cat bit him. Jin threw the cat away. Jin and Murakami were angry. Jin asked why Murakami bit him, and in response received a question about whether he was in his right mind. Murakami lashed out at Jin, during which he reminded him that he had told him many times not to awaken his sword. He had said this many times. Murakami said that Jin might ruin everything, and that he was worried about him, while Jin asked me to just listen. All of a sudden, Murakami transformed into a human and was already attacking Jin in this form. He said there were no excuses for Jin, and asked what could be more important than the life of Solderet's only contractor. Jilly tried to separate them, saying that the master had just returned. Then suddenly he said that she didn't bring strawberry pie, and it looked like they had a problem. Jin tried to justify himself by saying that his friend was kidnapped right out from under his nose, and who knows what would happen if he left Mesa. But Murakami said that Jin has a pendant, and this is not some costume jewelry. Jin said that he didn't want to waste it, explaining that he might encounter much more powerful enemies. Murakami was even angrier that it would be considered a waste for Jin to use the pendant. Jin didn't understand why Murakami was so surprised as Murakami continued to speak negatively about Jin. Then Jin asked how Murakami knew that he had tried to awaken the sword, to which Murakami replied that Jin's shadow energy rank had skyrocketed from 3rd to 4th, so it wasn't hard to guess. Jin said that he felt the energy of the shadows overwhelm him, but he never imagined that he would jump an entire rank. But Murakami said that Jin should thank Solderet for his mercy. A total of 10 people had experienced shadow energy poisoning, now counting Jin as 11, and 9 of them had died. Jin is one of the survivors. He asked who the other one assumed it was the founder. But Murakami said he was the other survivor, and if it was Temer, he would have died. Jin waved his hand and said that it meant that he and Murakami were similar. He asked him not to worry because he wasn't ready to experience such pain again, and then Jin went to wash up. Murakami told Jilly that he would have to starve Jin out to punish him, but Jilly said that she is going to make the master dinner. Murakami was jealous of Jin, and now we see that the action takes place in a luxurious room framed in gold. The siblings discussed that there was no way Jin could defeat a White Wolf warrior, and they joked that Jin could only defeat a bandit wearing a wolf skin. They wondered how he managed to do this since he had only just reached the 3rd rank. One of the sisters said that it was possible, but only if Jin met the weakest White Wolf. This is Jin's sister, Anne Runcandle, the 9th standard bearer of the Rung Candles. But Mu Runcandle, the 8th standard bearer of the Runcandles, said that even if it was impossible, and that it made even less sense that Mom believed Jin right away. And then we see Hayden and Daytona. They discuss whether Jin really killed the wolf. Hayden said that no matter what kind of monster Jin is, it's impossible. The problem isn't whether or not he killed the White Wolf, but whether or not he moves to the advanced group. Daytona agreed. He said that if Jin studied with them, they would be finished, and they both imagined an evil Jin in their head who wanted to beat them up. They agreed that it was terrible. Then someone called them. It was Mew, and she asked them what they were whispering about, if they were afraid of what would happen when their little brother came to them. They said they weren't afraid, and Anne smilingly told them not to lie to their older sister. Then she made a threatening face and said that what she hated most was being lied to, so much so that she was ready to rip out their tongues. The twins, under pressure from their sisters, admitted that they were afraid of Jin. Then she offered to help. She allowed them to use them. She told them not to miss their chance and take slaves. The twins were happy. In the advanced group, everything follows the laws of the jungle. Both knights of the 3rd and 5th rank are engaged here. Newcomers are mixed with those who have been here for 10 years. Mew and Anne choose several cadets and turn them into their slaves. She allows the twins to take them and show Junior where he belongs because they don't like him either. Then she grinned and told them to finish the job, because if they didn't make it, she will be the one coming for them. Meanwhile, Jin, after completing the first task, it was finally decided to transfer him to the advanced group. In addition, his shadow energy had reached the 4th rank, and if he wanted to use it properly, he should reach the 6th rank in swordsmanship in 5 years. Knights of the 6th rank are excellent swordsmen, 7th masters, and those who have reached the 8th rank and above are considered exceptions to the rule. For every 2 million people on the continent, there are barely 100 who have reached the 9th or 10th rank, and only one could go even further. The demigod Star Knight Chiron Runcandel. Jin firmly believed and was determined that in this life he would be able to become a Star Knight, and he wanted to surpass his father. But for now, Jin's focus is on his twin brothers. They are also in the intermediate class with him. He suspects they will try to bully him like they did in his past life. He can't just relax and ignore them anymore, since this family only respects skills and strength. Then with brute force, I will dominate them. We see someone knocking on the door. Rose was sitting in the room. She allowed him to enter. It was Jin, and he asked his mother if she had called him, Jin's mother. Rose said that she did call for him. She told Jin that she had heard that he had successfully completed his mission and that she was very happy with his results. He thanked her for her words. Suddenly, Rosa started talking about Petro's report, and she said that she understood that Jin had refused her advice to move to another room. She asked Jin if he knew that only the child who becomes the next ruler could use these chambers. This room has been empty since Joshua used to live in it when he was younger, but it's time for Jin to take over the room. Jin thanked his mother, but said that he couldn't accept the offer. When asked why, he said that no matter how good the room is, it remains just 4 walls. Besides, it is too luxurious and big for him. When asked if Jin really didn't want to live there, he said that he really didn't want to, and had already made up his mind. His mother just tapped her finger on the table and then let him go. When Jin left, she speculated about whether the younger one didn't have a drop of greed or whether there was too much of it. She was thinking about what she had offered quarters for those of the children who would become the head of the Runcandle family in the future, and how her children were happy with the status. Rose is sure that Jin knows about the support he will receive from the moment he enters this room, but he will become a target for those who did not get this opportunity. She assumed that Jin probably realized that she was testing him. His mother would be looking forward to Jin's results in the intermediate class. And here we see Jin standing in front of the cadets, telling them that from tomorrow, they will be transferred to the intermediate training class, which consists of several factions. He warned them that they would get caught up in territorial battles and face aggression. But he told them not to be afraid, because he wasn't just going to watch if something happened. He said that it would all disappear once he completely left the intermediate class. Until then, he asked them to move in groups of 3, even if they weren't in training, and not to act alone. And now we see the following picture. Here is Zed Runkendal, the eldest member of the Runkendal family, a knight of the 8th rank, and the younger brother of Chiron Runkendal. He's standing in front of the cadets. Zed has told them that 10 recruits have joined out this year, and 27 have dropped out. He turned to the new students and told them to gain experience from their mentors in the intermediate class, and he would only teach them how to use the sword and evaluate their skills. Zed said they'd have to deal with everything on their own, except for murders. Then he turned to the mentors. He shouted and asked about what he always repeats, and all the mentors shouted that the Runkendal didn't need weaklings. They screamed again, and again they screamed louder. Jin just thought about how loudly they were trying to scare them. As they stood there, Jin noticed the twins too. They also stood there and shouted that the Runkendal didn't need weaklings. Jin noticed that the ugly guy behind the twin seemed to have been training for quite some time, and there was no way the twins would defeat him alone. He realized that they must have enlisted the help of sisters Mew and Anne. Jin decided that even though they were trying to bully Jin and his faction, he had to let them know that they had misunderstood. Suddenly, he started walking towards his brothers and the guy standing next to him. The brothers were scared and didn't understand why he was going there, but they tried to reassure themselves that their sisters would support them. Suddenly, Jin unsheathed his sword and slashed at the guy standing next to the twins. The brothers were horrified. Zed was surprised to see it too. Jin chopped off this guy's arm, and all the cadets froze in horror. The guy fell to his knees and screamed in pain, clutching his arm, or rather what was left of it. Jin thought that it shouldn't be him who was terrified, but them. Then he ordered a doctor to be called. Daytona took out his sword and started asking Jin why he did it, and if he was insane. But Jin ignored him and turned to the cadet who had his arm cut off and asked him his name. The cadet introduced himself. His name was Kajin Romero. Jin then asked him if he knew why Jin had cut off his hand. At that moment, Daytona pointed his sword at Jin and asked why he was ignoring them, and told him to draw his sword again. Jin frowned into his eyes and turned to his brothers, asking if they couldn't see that he was talking to Kajin, and also said that he would accept the duel later, and told them to keep quiet. Hayden was infuriated, and he called Jin names and asked how Jin dared to act like this after injuring his slave. Suddenly, he closed his own mouth as if he had said something he didn't want to say. Jin understood what was going on, and when he heard that Kajin was part of the Hate and faction, he said that Kajin was looking at him too bloodthirstily, so he crippled him. The cadets were shocked when it turned out that a battle for political supremes had begun between the brothers. Zed enjoyed what he saw and was glad that the twins had been dealt a decent blow after trying to suppress their younger brother. Thanks to the twins, Kajin's position as part of their faction was stable. Because of this, Jin's actions weren't all that unpredictable, but the battle for hegemony is an established tradition in the Runkendals. It was a very bold move from Jin. Jin then ordered all the new recruits to listen as he shouted out his name. He told them that they could point their swords at him or suddenly attack, told them to keep in mind that if he saw even one hint of hostility, he would not hesitate to cut them down, thus intimidating the cadets quite well. Suddenly, Zed turned to Jin. Jin was ready to listen to him. Jin was calling him senior. Furious, Zed asked if Jin really thought he could do something like that in front of him. Jin answered without a moment's hesitation that he thought so. Jin said that he was confident that he would not fight the twins, but against you, Elder. Zed found it interesting that Jin would fight him. He materialized a sword in his hand. He pointed his sword at Jin and ordered him to explain. According to Zed, depending on Jin's response, he might lose his head. So Zed got angry and ordered Jin to explain. Jin replied that the senior had decided to use an intimidating technique in front of his cadets, even though Jin was in the classroom. The elder swung his sword. The sword passed very close to Jin, but Jin didn't even move and kept looking at the elder. There was a small cut on his face from the elder's attack, but he continued to stand still and only remained silent. Zed asked about how Jin didn't like Zed scaring his cadets. Zed said that if that's the case, Jin should have challenged him right away. Why would he hurt another cadet? Jin replied that it was because he couldn't beat Zed right now. Meanwhile, Belop and Mesa looked on in fear. Jin went on to say that if he thought he was going to win, he wouldn't have attacked Kajin or his brothers, but the elder Zed himself. Zed said that Jin didn't seem to value his life too much, or maybe he had too much hope for the status of the patriarch's son to protect him. But Jin said that wasn't the case. The hero said that in his opinion, Sitting idly by simply because his opponent is stronger than himself is not what a member of the Runkendal family would do. Zed said that death would only be a moment, but his honor is what lives on, and chuckled. The twins, like the other cadets, were shocked. Then he loudly said that Jin's bravado was so absurd that it made him, Jin's uncle, happy. And then he laughed out loud. The elder said that Jin should be allowed to do so, and that Jin was truly worthy of his surname. Zed turned to the cadets and told them to remember this day. Today they saw what it was like to be in the Runkendal family. He said that this brat decided to show that they were crazy fanatics, then shouted at the cadets to fight and not forget who they were by clenching his fist. The senior officer released the cadets and informed them that their training would start tomorrow. The twins were tense and scared. Jin, with his back to them, said that as their little brother, he was giving them advice. Right now, the twins are more afraid of their older siblings, but will it be the same in the future? He told them not to focus too much on what is happening now, and advised them to think better about the future. Murakan said, "He's back earlier than expected." Then Jin turned to Jilly, who was bringing him tea, and said that he had declared the battle for hegemony to the twins. Jilly was surprised, and a drop of sweat slid down her face. But as Jin thought, the older sisters, Mew and Anne, were probably covering for them. Jilly couldn't believe it, so she asked Jin again if he had actually declared a battle for the hegemony to both of them at once. Jin said that he had injured one of his brother's students, and after a bit of questioning, it turned out that this student of their sister's faction was his, because his brother couldn't keep his mouth shut. Right now, the disciple belongs to the Gemini faction, and if the sisters find out about this, they will surely be furious. Jin said that there was no way his brothers would be able to recruit a 5th-ranked knight to their faction, since they usually recruit those who are weaker than them to their factions. Nervously, Jilly said that both sisters had already reached the rank of standard bearers, and she explained that there was an unspoken rule that standard bearers could only fight with other standard bearers. Jin said it was true. It's a huge blow to them, as they're both standard bearers, and they can't bully Jin yet. The only thing they can do is disrupt the distribution of his room and increase the difficulty of missions thanks to their authority. Then there is a chance that Jin will be injured or killed. But do not forget about single-player missions among those that come with high difficulty. That's where no one will be watching Jin, which means he can use all his power. Jilly wasn't nervous at all, but on the contrary, she was even happy and said that then this would be a great opportunity. Jin only said that he should thank his sisters and strive for more. All of a sudden, he picked up Moth and said that he was sure no one would mind if Jin took the cat with him. After Moroccan gives a questioning meow, Jin says that he wouldn't take him on missions. For Moroccan, he had something else to do. Moroccan asked him what he was going to do, but Jin didn't answer, saying that he would tell them later. And until then, Moroccan and Jilly needed to lay low. And now we are transported to the training session. Zed said that they would all move out after finishing their days training at the secret Runkendal family only training ground. Only Hayden, Daytona, and Jin were standing there. The elder said that these were special privileges for pure bloods, but warned them not to think it would be easy. Zed revealed that their family's sword skills are based on destructive power. They fight, they win, they own. They don't have a specific definition, but there are secret techniques that can only be learned as a standard bearer. When Jin saw the twins' faces, he realized that it was probably the sisters' fault. Zed went on to say that fencing doesn't have a fixed form, whether it's a leg position or a stance. This is the main difference between the Runkendals and other noble families. He asked if they knew why. Jin raised his hand and replied that it was because of the unique physical abilities and talents that the Runkendals possess. It was true. His uncle said that being a Runkendal meant having a great bloodline. Their physical stats and sword skills were even beyond the dreams of an ordinary person. Zed said that if they had any minor flaws, their level was still much higher than average. That's why it was so easy for them to learn. Zed said with an evil smile. He gave each of the brothers a steel ball. Jin looked at the ball and thought that there was something inside. He assumed that there were steel parts. Zed said that this ball is called a pure stone, and when it hits, it makes a ringing sound. Jin uncle said they were going to hear 3 kinds of sounds, so he asked them to pay attention. The first time he hit the edge of the ball, the sound was so unpleasant that one of the brothers even had to cover his ears with his hands, and the others were clearly not happy either. Then he struck again, but this time weakly. For them, the sound was no longer unpleasant, as they understood. The sound of a stone depends on the force with which it is hit. If you hit it weakly, the sound will be quiet, but if you calculate the strength well, the ringing will be truly beautiful. The essence of training is to make sure that the sound is perfect with each beat. This is done to train the strength of the spirit will, perseverance, and concentration. If you take into account the physical abilities of the Runkendal family, then this exercise is perfect, although its essence is simple. However, they only hit a piece of steel, which is too boring for the Runkendal's special training. So Zed made the last sound. Jin wondered what the third sound would be because he could definitely hear that there was something inside the ball, like steel shards. While Zed was beating the ball, Jin suddenly realized something. He ran to his brothers and shouted for them to fall down. The ball split, and then there was an explosion. It was powerful. The brothers were lying on the floor with Jin on top of them. They didn't know what had happened, but it was clear that Jin's reaction was good. Zed said that if they hit too hard, it would end up like this, after they survived the explosion and escaped unscathed. Zed said they were the first since Luna to be unharmed by the rock. Most of their siblings learned from him, so this brutal performance is part of the initiation. Zed never thought there would be another unharmed child. Jin then asked him if he could find out how Luna was able to escape the damage. Zed said that Jin would probably be disappointed when he found out. At least his brothers were annoyed. Luna didn't shy away like Jin did. She took the blow on herself, but she was so strong that there wasn't even a scratch left on her. Zed told the three of them to start training anyway. He ordered them to beat until they could produce a clear sound at any time and in any situation. And now, we are transported to Luna. Her nanny started talking about what Luna had said earlier. Luna asked if Nanny was saying that someone in the family wanted to kill Jin. Nanny said she suspected young ladies in Miyu and Anne, given how much they try to keep an eye on Jin. Nanny is pretty sure the sisters had something to do with it. Even though it looked like they wanted to kill Jin, Luna still couldn't believe that the sisters would be so crazy as to try to kill in the Tempest Castle. She said that it was forbidden for those in the Tempest Castle to vie for inheritance. Besides, if Chiron found out about something like this, the family would be turned upside down and their own lives would be in danger. The nanny. She asked if there was a good chance that Jin had lied or taken the wrong approach. Jin was 10 at the time, so both options are possible. Since then, Luna and Nanny have been investigating for 5 years but have not achieved any results. Luna doubted that Jin would lie. She thought of what he had said to her. She said he was careful with her then, not because he felt uncomfortable, but because he felt threatened with his life. It was in the air, Luna said. Nanny asked if young ladies Miyu and Anne should be looked at. Luna said that she probably shouldn't share that she was worried about the fact that they still hadn't found anything. It was kind of creepy for her. Nanny said she was worried too. Nanny said she worries that Luna might be harmed by her siblings. Luna replied that she was able to survive her 30th birthday and made it clear to her that there was no need to worry so much. Luna said she hoped Jin was doing well. Nanny asked if she meant Master Zed's training. She said it was true. Jin should feel the effect of her mind-eye training. The clear stone really hits hard. Luna said she was sure Jin was fine. She loved watching him grow up. We'll move on the next day. The training session started 4 hours ago. Jin and the twins were very tired, and Zed gave them a break. Jin thought it was an exercise to control his strength and develop his mind, but he was wrong. He needed to increase the destructiveness of his aura. Zed hits the rock without using it, but Jin doesn't have enough physical strength, so he decided that it needed to be strengthened with aura control. First, you need to focus on the aura and achieve a clear sound. Only then can Jin break the stone. The main thing is not to rush. Even the twins were able to do this in their previous lives, so Jin was sure that he would definitely be able to do it. Zed looked at his brothers and thought that they were all holding up well, but when he looked at Jin, he thought that this kid was special. He wondered if Jin might be able to break Luna's record, and now we see that the day is already coming to an end. Zed told Jin to tell them that if they plan on collapsing tomorrow, they shouldn't come. As the brothers left, Zed pondered. His real thought was that the twins were exhausted much later than he thought. They are real Runkendals after all. And then there's the youngest. Suddenly, Zed starts to get angry about why Jin is the youngest. Zed believed that if Jin had been born 10 years ago, all the Runkendal's forces would have been concentrated in his hand. Then he said that his brother was a disgrace. Then Zed sat down annoyed and repeated what a shame it was. A month later, middle-class cadets are being trained. The man announced that the middle class had received their first mission. Those cadets whose names he names should come forward. Their first mission is security. They are assigned to guard the new recruits from the Blacksmith Association. Then he called out the names. The third mission is the destruction of demonic creatures. The target of the mission will be orcs. Location: unprotected lands of the Corano Principality. He looked at the page he was reading from. He didn't understand something or was surprised, and then read out the names. Mesa and Balop were among them, and they were shocked. The man said that there were 25 orcs on them that needed to be destroyed, and as the orcs move in groups, they will have to muster their resolve and give it their all. The man said that this was all and wished everyone good luck. Other cadets began to talk about how destroying orcs wasn't for new recruits. They discussed that those sent on a mission would return half dead. Suddenly, a cadet standing next to Kajin. He grinned and said that he thought they should prepare incense and graves. Kajin said he had a moment before leaving for the mission and asked if they would like to make a will. One of the cadets got angry, but the other one continued to sneer, insinuating that Jin's faction was very weak without him. Mesa pulled away one of the faction cadets and told Thomas to keep his cool. So far, they are not strong enough to compete with them. There's a mission ahead. You'll still have time to hurt yourself, Mesa said. Tainment started snapping, and that's when Mesa lost her temper. She told him to shut up and stand still. She said that since their commander was Jin Runkandel, they should focus on the mission they received and return unharmed. She said it was the only way they would put the other cadets in their place. We see that the brothers continue to train with clean stones. Suddenly, Hayden hit it too hard and blew him up, sending shards of rock flying straight at Jin. Hayden asked Jin if he was okay, to which Jin asked Hayden to do it somewhere far away from him. It's been a month since Jin started training with pure stones. His brothers started blowing them up, but Jin had a strange feeling. It was as if a path had appeared in front of his eyes and was imprinted as clearly as the trajectory of an arrow. And if the pure stone shards hit him again, he would definitely be able to dodge. Perhaps this was the perception that Luna had trained him in. Jin decided that before he forgot, he should try again. But suddenly, Zed asked for attention and said that they were assigned a mission. The brothers whined about being sent to a fancy celebration. They are being sent to the Vermont Empire. Zed offered his condolences and said that thanks to them, the rest of the brothers wouldn't have to dance at the imperial reception. But he chided them, for even if it's such a small thing, aren't they ashamed to sigh about their mission? He said that if he saw it again, he would make them dream of death. The brothers were terrified. Jin also thought that Mew and Anne were mean, punishing their ignorant brothers by sending them to a social event in the Vermont Empire. Zed said it was a big event, and it was hard to refuse even if you were a Runkandel. He ordered them to go there and learn something useful. Then Zed looked at his notebook again and gave Junior a task. Jin's task is assassination. The target is the toy of the Ice Palace Master Talares. In other words, one of her many lovers. Zed asked Jin if he knew about the palace. Jin said he knew. The Ice Palace is a huge tower in the middle of the continent's western sea. It is owned by the Master of the Ice Palace, the 51st Master Dolores in Dorma, also known as the Spider of the Abyss. She became famous for being ruthless to anyone who attempted to kill her lovers. Zed warned that the palace and its master were powerful, and that this palace was beyond the reach of Runkandel or Zippel. Jin's target is Alcaro Shander, who is accompanied by the Ice Palace's men and lives in the Mammoth Crime District. Hearing this, the twins were taken aback. The twins whispered that if it was in Mammoth, they would know that the knights had ordered it, and that it was too much, even if the younger one was so good. The customer was the Chandra family itself. They ordered the murder of their own. It looked like the family couldn't get Alcaro back, so they decided to kill him. Jin said firmly and decisively that he would do it. Zed was surprised by Jin's choice, because if Jin had refused, Zed would have talked to the knights. Zed laughed and told Jin that he liked his straightforwardness. The uncle said that the three of them would leave in 3 days. The twins couldn't believe that the younger one would actually go to Mammoth. Zed said that since Jin agreed, there was no need to stop him. Suddenly, the brothers approached Jin. They said that in case of danger, he should declare that he is a Runkandel, and then no one would touch him. Jin asked why are they worried about him. Both were flustered and said that they weren't. Jin was going towards the Pure Stone. The twins feared he would hit it hard and hurt them, but after precisely hitting it, Jin told the older brothers to decide who they liked best. Zed turned to Hayden and Daytona and said that Jin was telling them not to go against him if they wanted to live happily for the rest of their lives. Then we fast forward a few days. Mesa and the other cadets came out to see Jin off, and she asked him if he was going to Mammoth. She noticed that his hair was a different color. Jin said that he couldn't go there as a Runkandel, so he disguised himself. Jin said that their tasks are different, so they need different gates. After asking them about the mission, Jin replied that they looked gloomy and asked if something was wrong. Mesa said everything was fine, and they came to say goodbye. Jin asked about what it means to say goodbye. Mesa said that if it didn't go so well, some of them might die. Jin replied that nothing would change if they kept this gloomy attitude and advised them to focus on their task and make smart decisions until he returned. He asked them not to waste energy and worry in vain. Jin said goodbye to Bellop too. Jin then asked Jilly to keep an eye on them. Murakan, in the form of a cat, told Jin not to worry because he will follow them and keep them safe, but Jin gave him an order not to be caught or noticed. Jilly said Sir Murakan left and it would be quiet for a while. Jin told her to think of it as a vacation and that he would bring her some souvenirs. Jilly said that he was worried about him because he had to kill the mistress of the Ice Palace. Although Jin isn't just an ordinary cadet, Mamet is a dangerous place, so Gilly asks Jin to take care of himself. Jin got on his horse and said goodbye to the nanny. Mamet. The place Jin went to is a crime district, a place where the most repulsed criminal elements gather. And now we see that a man came into the bar and shouted to everyone to meet the new guy. This man's name is Tonk. This bar is a hideout for criminals. And then we see Jin enter the bar. The people sitting there were a little surprised that it looked like they really had a new one. After entering the bar, Jin tossed the silver coin and said that there would be a glass of water and a light snack. Everyone was surprised at his audacity because he was just a kid. Tonk went up to Jin and told him that he was new, but he was acting like one of them. Tonk asked him where the Jin came from. Then he viciously said that since Jin is in Mamet, he should learn their rules first. He ordered him to kneel down and then lick his toes. But Jin didn't let him finish and stabbed him in the throat. Blood splattered on the table and Tonk died. Jin put the knife down on the table and asked him how long he would wait for his order. Everyone in the bar was shocked, and then they laughed out loud and started drinking, saying that they expected Tonk to die like this. Jin just kept thinking that just like his master had said, all the madmen gathered here. He was talking about the woman who taught him magic in his past life. She told Jin that if he wanted to impress the local outcast, he needed to show them his strength and fearlessness. Jin had received a huge amount of support in his previous life, and he hoped that one day he would be able to repay it. So the bartender handed Jin a glass of water and a light snack, saying he hadn't poisoned them. Poisons are not favored here, and he knows it. The bartender said that Jin was well informed and asked if he had anyone from around here. Jin said it was none of his business. Then the bartender started asking Jin what he wanted. He offered him drugs, said the last batch was pretty good, and also asked if he was looking for someone. Jin asked if he knew someone called Hister who had passed by. The bartender said that he was sure that no such person was there, so Jin asked him for a decent place to spend the night, with no bedbugs or anything like that. The bartender said there was only one place, and in the west of the city, Moonwell Inn. He said that even kings stay there, so Jin can rest easy. So Jin came to Moonwell Inn. As he walked, he thought about the task at hand. Alcaro Zendler is the trash son of the Count. He grew up not knowing what hardship is like, going crazy with entertainment and pleasure. All he has is a noble family name, Alcaro, a man who trembles before the strong and mocks the weak. The reason he's staying in such a dangerous city is because he wants to attract the attention of the mistress of the Ice Palace, so it's the only place he can be. Is the hotel. Jin thought of the new drug the bartender had mentioned and assumed that Alcaro was brewing it in his room. Jin also assumed that if Alcaro was the Ice Palace master's lover, then he must have security guards. So Jin went into the hotel to investigate the situation in the lobby first, and the first thing he saw was a disgruntled Alcaro yelling at the knights. Jin was lucky. He didn't think that he would meet him so soon. Alcaro, meanwhile, continued to argue with the knights. He was fiercely begging them for something. Alcaro said that if he got it, he would do anything for them. One of them said that this was wrong and that it was their duty to protect him. The knight was about to say something about Alcaro's pampering when suddenly Alcaro shut him up, saying that he didn't even want to hear about it. And he called them names and said that when his darling came back, she would blow their heads off. The knight behind him sighed heavily, and Alcaro was angry. He was beginning to boast that he was a member of the Chendora family and they were peasant brats, when suddenly the knight knocked him out with a blow. The knights obviously didn't want to protect Alcaro because he wasn't very smart. They would be happy if he died of an overdose. The guard said that he didn't understand why they should let Alcaro live, but they were still determined to do what they had to do without any reasoning. Jin analyzed the security detail. Alcaro's security is about level 6, or so he thought. He also knew that killing Alcaro would be much easier than he thought. Problems will start after Jin needs to get him out of the way. Avoid the guards and stay safe. Jin reflected that it was an unspoken rule of Mamet not to use poison. Everyone would be insulted if he used poison, and the guards might get in the way. Alcaro should be removed quietly, and slamming his palm down on the table, he made up his mind to act. And here we see some people coming and discussing how many guardians Alcaro has. The girl clearly hates Alcaro, saying that all the difficulties are because of him because he doesn't know his place. One of the knights walking nearby said that it would be over for today. He called the girl's mistress and said that she came personally to get rid of him. They are going to Moonwell, and the girl said that she can get rid of his kind at any time. She continued by saying that she couldn't wait to tell them the good news. Suddenly, thunderclouds appeared in the sky, lightning flashing everywhere. The guard said it was from Moonwell side. The girl said they definitely picked the wrong day. And now, we see Jin again, who has decided that he will raise the entire Moonwell with magic directly from the room. Once he added the 4th ranked shadow energy, he would gain the destructive power of the 6th. That way, everyone will assume that the mage is at least ranked 6, and no one will be able to suspect Jin, because who would think of a brat who is barely 15? After all, even Verid and Zippel barely reached that level. In addition, due to the properties of shadow energy, Jin will not leave any traces of using magic, so there will not be a single reason for suspicion. He decided that a lightning bolt would be enough to make it look like it had come from outside. As the shadow began to gather around him, he used the release of shadow energy. We see that Jin is surrounded by darkness. While summoning lightning, he said that no matter how much he thinks this plan is a bit crazy, and so he began to summon lightning. It was Jin who created the lightning bolt that struck Moonwell. Well, it turned out that the girl was Cirrus Endorma, the commander of the 7 swords of the Ice Palace, and the daughter of the master of the Ice Palace. Lightning struck the building and destroyed it. The guard told Cirrus that it seemed some high-ranking mage had a grudge against someone inside the Moonwell. Cirrus said it was probably true, but the mage might be up to their liking. Cirrus added that there were 6 Ice Palace men in the inn, and that her mother's lover, Alcaro, was definitely there. Cirrus told them to hurry up, prioritizing the lives of their people, and said to ignore Alcaro's safety. The entire sky was blue with the glow of lightning. Suddenly, another bolt of lightning struck right in front of the girl. The bandits fled in terror. They thought it was one of Zippel's magicians because one of them had recently killed a Zippel, but it turned out that this bandit was lying. One of the guards was walking to the inn, but suddenly, lightning struck in front of him. It was incredibly strong, stronger than the others. Haydn was shocked. Cirrus said that judging by the force of the impact, it was the last attack. Cirrus hoped they were okay. Suddenly, Jin emerged from the rubble. He was thinking about the fact that his last lightning bolt, which he had spent all the energy of the shadows on, was very close in power to the 7th rank. He managed to avoid serious injury. Jin saw that the Ice Palace guards were wounded, but alive. He didn't see Alcaro. Jin thought that if Alcaro had survived, this was a great chance for him to finish the job. But suddenly Cirrus appeared in front of him, and she was surprised that there were people of her own age in Mammoth. She asked Jin if he was okay, and he said that he had been hurt by lightning. Cirrus told Jin to move and get up. Haydn said that their men were hurt, but they were all safe. This was a relief to Cirrus, who ordered everyone to gather outside, and if Alcaro was with them, she ordered them to kill him. Cirrus said that magic was uniform, and that it was definitely one person, and ordered them to capture the magician if they found him. Jin realized that the Ice Palace Master's daughter was standing in front of him, and from her words, he deduced that she had come to deal with Alcaro. Jin decided that Alcaro was going to die anyway, so there was no point in waiting out. The problem was something else. It would be bad if the daughter of the Ice Palace Master remembered him. Jin decided that he needed to hide his face as much as possible and pretend that he was injured in this mess in order to leave as soon as possible. One of the guards said it was a shame that Alcaro had been killed by a magical attack, which meant that they had failed the mission to escort him. But Cirrus wasn't so annoyed. She said that she had come to relieve them of this burden, and that she had had enough of his whims. Raising her sword, Cirrus loudly announced that this area was now under the control of the Ice Palace. She also shouted her name and said that she was the daughter of Talares, the master of the Ice Palace and the commander of the 7 swords of the Ice Palace. She said that anyone who resisted would be declared an enemy of the Ice Palace. 2 bandits decided to object. They shouted that they didn't care whose daughter she was there. This was Mammoth. The second man shouted that it was the kings of this city who ruled here, not Ceres, and that maybe the Ice Palace was to blame for the attack. In an instant, she cut off their heads. As she had said, the protesters would become enemies of the palace. Then she said that playing the ruler of this garbage pit really allows you to look down on the Ice Palace. Cirrus said that if it turned out that the attack was caused by the Ice Palace, the bandits would receive compensation. But what if the main target was them, and the Ice Palace was an accidental victim? And she asked if it was not clear they should take control of this place, and not leave it to some wannabe pretend king. The bandits told them to do what they wanted, and that they agreed that this magician should be found and killed. Cirrus replied that of course They would start looking for the mage among the survivors, but it couldn't be any of them. There wasn't a single mage there. Cirrus said who knows whose anger the bandits might have attracted, and immediately told them to keep their objections to themselves. And then she went back to Jin. She asked why a kid like him was still here. When she told him to leave, Jin said he was just a little scared and couldn't move because he hurt his leg. Cirrus laughed and said that he was too cowardly for a man and too cute for a swordsman. She took out some cream and told Jin to roll up his pant leg. She said that Jin was lucky to have survived the attack and that she, Cirrus, was treating him with her medicine, and she told him to take it as a great honor. Jin asked how he could repay her kindness, but she smiled and said it was nothing. She asked how someone like him could repay someone like her. She told him to think of it as a pleasant memory and thank the Ice Palace now and then. So she said goodbye to him and Jin waved back. Jin's mission was accomplished, and so we see cadets killing ogres. They just killed the 18th ogre. One of the cadets said that he thought they would return at this rate without any losses. Cadets Tainman and Scott were happy that everyone would survive and rubbed their noses at those who laughed at them. But Mesa immediately interrupted them, telling them not to relax because there are still 7 monsters roaming around. Mesa had thought that orcs usually moved in groups, but these ones moved singly, so they were easier to kill. She thought that the lords were watching over them after all, or that Master Jin was blessed, and that the blessing affected them as well. She told everyone to return to the search and ordered that no one relaxes until the end of the mission, and that everyone remained vigilant. And now we see that Murakan in the form of a cat is watching them from the bushes. He was bored because all he could do was wait for the cadets to catch the remaining 7 before he could go home. Suddenly we're flashed back a few days to when Jin's squad started their mission. We see the orcs gathered in a large group. Murakan, standing on the dais, ordered them to listen and said that from now on they should walk one at a time. He threatened them that if they disobeyed his orders or hung around in pairs, he would destroy them all. He told them to get out of his sight if they understood. The orcs scattered in fear, and now we are transported back to the present. Murakan, in the form of a cat, talks about how Jin forced him to do such unworthy things. He wondered even if Jin was Solderate Contractor. He is not that amazing to order Murakan like that. As he watched Jin's party from the tree, all he could think about was what new comics he would ask for when he got back. This body Murakan needs to do everything possible so that the squad returns from the mission in full force. Suddenly Murakan can notice someone approaching. Murakan was confused that someone was coming from the other side. Murakan couldn't figure out where they'd come from, but he knew that the cadets wouldn't be able to just come back if they faced it, and Murakan was forced to use shadow energy. The good thing was that the cadets were somewhere in the 3rd rank after all. If it was Jin, he would have instantly noticed Murakan's barrier, and now we see how the shadow outlined a circle, and then a dome was formed. Bellup noticed something. He noted that it was getting dark rather suddenly, but he thought it was going to rain. As we can see, a huge night was approaching them. Murakan transformed into a dragon and started flying towards whatever was approaching. He was outraged that someone dared to send their warriors without his permission. As he approached, he saw that it wasn't a living creature, but a relic from ancient times. It was a grave giant with a shield in one hand and a spear in the other, and the giant was completely covered in armor. Murakan was sure that his dragon clan had gotten rid of the grave giants a couple of thousand years ago. Besides, he couldn't understand how a giant guarding the graves of dead lords could be here. It wasn't a pleasant meeting. At this moment, Murakan started to form a ball of shadow energy. He wanted to end the grave giants in one fell swoop. He used shadow energy on the giant. From such a force, the giant began to collapse. Murakan descended to the ground. He transformed as a human and said that he hadn't used his powers in so long that his bones were cracking. Murakan said there was no way the grave giant could have appeared here by accident, no matter how much he thinks about it. The Zippel family is clearly involved. He couldn't understand what was going on in this world. Murakan decided that it would be best if he didn't tell Jin anything yet, and if something happened, Murakan would be able to protect him. Murakan thought that Jin had grown a lot in 10 years, but he was not sure that he had enough strength to go up against the Zippels yet. Suddenly we are transported to a workshop, and now we see for the first time the magician of transformation, Bouberie Gaston. He told Viscal that there was a problem with Bouberie's creation. The grave giant in Bouberie was very nervous. The one who entered the room was Viscal Ivliano, the head of the Kinzello terrorist group. Viscal said that he had already heard the news, and that as far as he knew, the cadets had been attacked by the grave giant during the night. Bouberie said it was true, but he would never have thought that anyone would dare destroy his precious creation. Viscal said that this is not so important now. After all, the one who defeated the giant is a dragon. Moreover, the Shadow Dragon. Viskel said that he specially went there personally to check everything out in person. Bubbery got nervous and asked Viskel if he meant that the dragon had noticed their work. Viskel said he wasn't sure, but he thought it was a warning. Viskel then told Bubbery to look around here and that he would send people to help. After all, he urgently needs to meet with the Zippel family. We are transported to the castle and see the following picture. Zed with a smile on his face for successfully completing the mission and returning from Mammoth in one piece. Zed said that the Bannerman who gave Jin this assignment would be surprised. Well, they'll be furious when they find out how it went. So Zed ordered all the fighters to disperse. Jin and his squad stood and congratulated each other on their successful missions. Jin told the group that they had done a great job, and they said they were very happy that Jin was safe. Then we see the cadets standing in the distance, start discussing them. One of them said that by some miracle, on the same day, the magician staged a terrorist attack at the hotel where the target of the task was staying. One of them said that Mr. Jin was really lucky. Another began by saying that they live in an unfair world, because not only is Runkendell loved by fate, but some people, no matter how hard they try, still can't get above the average cadet. One of the cadets said that he didn't know how skilled they were, but young Master Jin was only ranked 4, and his cadets were only ranked 3, and then asked Kajin if he was going to leave it like this. Kajin said that even if he was arrogant and the youngest lord, he still had pure Runkendell blood in his veins. Kajin said they couldn't do anything until the lady gave the order. Suddenly, Jin came up to them. They started whispering about whether Jin had heard them. Jin said that unfortunately, he had excellent hearing. The cadets were surprised. Jin asked Kajin if his arm was okay. Kajin reported about what had happened. They suddenly stopped and were surprised. They couldn't believe that their little brother had defeated Kajin. As Jin walked past them, he said it was easy. The twins are shocked, and then we see the sisters asking Kajin if Jin really beat him. Kajin said that he was very ashamed of himself. One of the sisters asked if Kajin had been bribed or if he had succumbed because Jin is a Runkendell. Kajin said none of that. Miu asked what was the matter then. She couldn't believe that Kajin was seriously claiming that a 15-year-old boy had defeated a rank 5 knight so quickly. Kajin said that not only he, but everyone who was on the training ground can confirm. Kajin also added that Jin's strength surpasses rank 5. Grinning, Miu said that it was her own fault for expecting something like this from someone like Kajin and told him to just leave. And so the sisters were left alone. The sister said that she thought the younger one was showing off to them. Miu replied that it wasn't just them. Jin was grinning at the whole family. Miu said that on Jin's next mission, they must send him to a place from which he will return dead. Next, we see Jilly telling Jin that there is a commotion in the Garden of Swords. Everyone is amazed by his abilities. Jin said, "The first patriarch, father and sister, Luna, in the entire history of the Runkendells. Only these 3 became 5th ranked knights at the age of 15, and so Jin now has the 5th rank of swordsmanship, 4th of magic and shadow energy." Jin hadn't even expected this level of swordsmanship. After all, he was just training normally with a pure stone and had reached the 5th rank. As he stared out the window, he thought that it looked like if one of his 3 powers, shadow energy, magic, or aura, became stronger, it affected the others. When Jin was overloaded with shadow energy earlier, he opened up auras and mana afterward. No one has ever possessed such abilities in history, so it's useless to search for records. But Jin is sure that these 3 powers are definitely connected. Suddenly, Jin noticed the flowers and asked Jilly if she had put them up. Jilly said they were brought in a while. Jin was away, so she didn't clean them up. Then she asked if she should get rid of them. Jin said no need. There were no curses on the flowers and everything was fine. Returning to the topic of conversation, Jin said that since they discovered that he had become a 5th ranked knight at 15, his brothers would start to get a little nervous, including brother Joshua, who is dying to be the next head. When Luna Runkendell relinquished her position as first standard bearer, the second standard bearer of Runkendell became a strong candidate, and with the support of his mother Rose Runkendell, he secured the position. Jin said that it would be a good idea to hide the abilities until the time comes, and he decides that revealing his achievements will do more good. Since it was reported that Jin had reached the 5th rank, news of him would spread further and would surely be covered in the press as well. Murakan said that Jin is very open about complimenting himself. Murakan is sure that if Jin becomes the center of attention, then his brothers will become more aggravated. Jin said that was true, but more importantly, Father would personally arrive at the Sword Garden, and then they were both surprised. Chiron needs someone else to be the heir other than Luna. His father was never happy with any of Jin's seniors. Sister Luna, who was the only one who got his attention, was not interested in the throne, so he decided that she was not suitable for the role of head of the family. Then Joshua strengthened his position. Brother Diff, Sister Rancha, and Sister Mary became temporary successors. This line was set in stone, but things have changed since Jin came along. Jin thought about how Chiron didn't look at age. Father is the kind of person who gives everyone a chance. Jin is sure that his orders will include two things. First, a test of whether Jin can overcome the age gap between him and his brothers. The second is protection, and Chiron doesn't want Jin to die at the hands of his relatives before he passes the test, because Jin is a special case. Gilly said that if Jin's story was published in the newspapers, he would be inundated with invitations from families and groups from all over the world. Jin said that she was right, but Jin had a plan to deal with all the meetings at once, which was to hold a banquet. When Chiron arrived, he told Gilly to be ready and told her that it would be her responsibility to keep a particularly vigilant eye on Murakhan. If Murakhan turned into a human and made his way to the reception, it would be the end of them. Murakhan. Surprise jumped up and said that he was not a child and he had no intention of doing this. And so a few days passed. Gilly says that the butler seems to be very busy answering an endless stream of mails. She asked Petro. It turned out that even the ruling family of the Vermont Empire wasn't left out. Jin said it was funny that they were also very curious about what was going on. Gilly said that the head had sent a schedule of home visits through him. Chiron is scheduled to arrive in a month, so even the arrival dates of other families were scheduled. Jin noticed that the young gentleman had become quite quiet lately. He said that if they tried to take control of him, when everyone's attention was on him, it would be like showing either their fear or hatred. Suddenly, the butler entered the room shouting. He was shocked and said that Jin was assigned a mission and sent straight to the ruins of Kalan. Then we see Jin's mother, Rose Runkendals, yelling at the flag bearers. She asked how they, who call themselves standard bearers, could have done their job so badly. She was furious that they'd sent Junior to Zippel territory. Suddenly, the door opened and Jin came in. At the same time, there were standard bearers in the room, among them Runcha Runkendel, the third standard bearer of the Runkendals, Ran Runkendel the fifth standard bearer, Vigo Rankendal the sixth standard bearer. Rose asked Jin if he had already heard that his next mission was in the Kalan ruins. Jin replied that he had, but Rose immediately said it was cancelled. There is no chance that Jin will go to Kalan. The sisters were outraged and decided to object, but Rose was furious and shut them up. She said that they only think about killing the younger one. Mai Yu asked if it was weird for her to kill him. Isn't this what the Runkendal stands for? The second sister also said that she didn't understand why my mother was protecting the little one. Rose said that if the sisters were crazy, then let them continue to talk nonsense. The sisters began to talk about how their mother and father had always forgiven their quarrels. They asked if it was because their family needed competition. She said that she was sure that everyone here grew up fighting, but not to kill each other. The second sister said that it was true. After all, she had been sent on ruthless missions so many times when she was only mid-rank. Rose finally agreed and said that competition is really needed, no matter what the methods and techniques are. But then she asked if they had reached the 5th rank at 15. The sisters were shocked. Rose said that Junior was different from all of them. She said that if they had jumped to the level of Junior at his age, she would have protected them too. But the sisters didn't deserve her protection. Rose said that he could see the state they were in, now that they were standard bearers, and he didn't regret it in the least. Then she turned to Rancha, Ran, and Vigo. She said that since the three of them were also standard bearers, they were responsible for the ruckus the sisters had caused. She ordered Rancha to practice self-discipline for a while and Rana and Vigo to return one family sword each from their vaults. Rose said that if it was up to her, she would have taken all the prestige swords they had. So the brothers still got off easy. With that all sorted out, Rose wondered what action Jin would take next in this situation. Rose wondered if Jin would pretend and coax her to relent or enjoy favoritism. She wanted to see how he would resolve this situation. So Jin turned to his mother and said that he really liked the mission assigned by the sisters. Shocked, his mother asked him if he really meant it, knowing what a rotten place the Kalan ruins were. Jin said he knew it was part of the Zippel territory that the Runkendal had wanted in the past and failed to get. The sisters were also shocked. Jin said he understood the risk, but he wasn't going to back down in this battle. He said that he thought the mission assigned to him was fine. Jin told the sisters that the place was really dangerous, but he didn't believe it was an irrational decision. He said that the sisters probably thought that he had quite high abilities, so Jin turned things around in his favor. Rose said it was reckless and asked Jin if he was trying to make his mother lose her temper. Jin said no, and that if they suddenly decided to replace a person on a mission, it would be tantamount to admitting their incompetence. Rose said the partners wouldn't have suspected them of that. The Jin sisters are just trying to hurt him because they can't break him in battle, using their authority. Jin also knows it's true, but she said that if he faced the sisters head-on, victory would be on their side. But if he succeeded in the mission, he would deal them a heavy blow. In other words, Jin saw a chance to win this battle. Rose said that the Kolon ruins were a place where he could die if he made a wrong move, and asked if he was sure he wanted to go there. Jin said that he was confident and asked if, when he successfully completed the mission, he would be able to get the swords that were taken from his brothers. He said that this mission was marked dangerous, so he asked to get at least such a reward. Ran said that they were just swords, and that if Jin wanted them so badly, she would give him one of the items she had so that Jin would forget about this mission. Ran asks Jin if he doesn't think staying alive until his father arrived would be enough. Jin thought it was funny and said that if it was so important, Ran would have stopped the sisters before they assigned Jin a task. His mother interrupted their conversation and told Jin that if he successfully completed the mission, she would give him the swords of his brothers. After these words, she dismissed everyone. Rose was afraid that Jin would do what Luna did, so she trampled on the other's pride, but she realized that it didn't seem necessary. She was sure Sharon would be happy to see the younger one grow up. Well, when everyone was out of the office, Anne asked Jin if he really thought he was lucky. Jin said they probably didn't know, but he wasn't too lucky. Anne said that soon his calmness would wear off because this was a team mission, and Jin would not be alone. Jin thanked her for her concern, and then said that they would see each other again. And here we see Jin meeting up with his team for this mission. Mail introduced himself first, then Lima, and Kajin was also in the middle. Mail said it was an honor to be with Jin, and apologized for his past mistakes. Lima said he doesn't make a mistake on a mission. Kajin added that this also applies to him. Jin forgave Kajin and offered to put the past in the past where it belongs, and get to work. Kajin thanked the young master. Jin wondered what kind of honor it would be if all three of them were members of Mew and Anne's faction. He thought they were planning to stab him in the back and blame it all on the danger of the mission. Mail said he would introduce Jin to the situation. This is a search mission. The place is the ruins of Kolon to find 4 artifacts. Initially, a native settlement was established on these lands, but now the territory belongs to the Zipples and is associated with the Kingdom of Philon. Although Kolon was discovered several 100 years ago, the Zipples who stumbled upon the ruins and the local inhabitants killed and enslaved almost the entire population. Of course, now they say that they respect the locals, but this is only at first glance. But the lives and rights of these natives are not important to most people, so they are ignored. Jin speculates that the reason Zipples spared their lives was to rule Kolon's land. This is a hypocritical act of alleged redemption of the past. Usually, the Zipple family is committed to good governance, and their people are genuinely loyal to them. Jin recalled that the Zipples had gone too far in his previous life, and they had blackened their reputation for a reason, but all for the sake of a mere-shaped artifact that the natives had carefully hidden. This was the Zipple family's biggest secret, but thank you to the brave journalists in Jin's past life for bringing the whole truth to light. A reporter published an article containing evidence of the atrocities committed by the Zipples in an attempt to find the artifact. According to local residents, it turned out that it was called the Fountain of Mana, a thing that just looking at it could raise one's mana level to 7. With it, the Zipple family would create an army of mages. But Jin knows it's going to start in 10 years because they haven't found the source yet. This time, Jin decided that he wouldn't let the Zipple take it. Mail said that the mages were coming back and then explained the strategy. He said that the artifact they were looking for was in the 3rd warehouse. Mail said that a surprise attack alone wouldn't be difficult, but there's detection magic in there. Kajin asked them not to worry because according to him, no matter what happens, they will protect Jin with their lives. Jin was skeptical, but he thanked him. Jin said that safety directly depends on endurance. He suggested that we rest for a while and start in an hour. Jin took some dried meat out of his pocket and offered them a snack. The 3 of them ate what Jin gave them. When they had all eaten it, Jin said he would go on without them and wished them sweet dreams. Mail started to fall, and Kajin asked if it was poison. Jin said it was just sleeping pills, and they fell on the floor. Jin asked Mail if he wanted to admit that they were there to kill him. Of course, Jin knew that was not their intention, but it would be less suspicious of him if he acted as arrogant as usual. Then Jin chuckled and wondered if it was only dogs who followed their master's orders with blind loyalty. And so, after Jin put his companions to sleep, he was left alone. We see 2 security guards talking about something, and suddenly one of them was neutralized by Jin. The second guard got scared and asked who he was, then hit Jin with a spear. Jin managed to dodge the spear. Then he lunged and kneed the guard in the throat. After knocking them out, Jin deduced that it didn't look like there were any other guards outside. He went to the vault doors and was surprised to see that they had a simple lock with no magic on it. Sometimes they let ordinary people hang around the third warehouse. So Jin thought the Zippels didn't know it was crucial. When Jin opened the door, he saw a magic circle of blood and detection on the floor. It is known to the public as a protective magic that allows you to recognize the bloodline. In fact, the circle distinguishes between humans and demonic beasts, as well as victims of the epidemic, that it didn't matter whose blood it was, as long as it belonged to a common person. Then he cut the guard's hand because he didn't want to leave any evidence. He spilled the blood of one of the guards on the circle. The circle glowed red, and Jin thought that the first signal was simple, but suddenly the circle was activated. Jin couldn't understand because he was using the man's blood, and yet the circle was activated, which meant the guard was sick or not human at all. And Jin saw that those two guards turned out to be monstrous. They turned into huge muscular creatures, and their eyes glowed red. Jin couldn't figure out what was wrong. He used the Wind of Silence spell. Any mages in the area can detect spells, so Jin wanted to minimize their use. But the situation had changed. It seems that the battle cannot be avoided. The monster ran at Jin and hit him, but Jin dodged, then drew his blade and hit back. The monster screamed in pain and got even angrier as it attacked again. This time Jin jumped out of the way. Jin then decided that he should use Bradamante, so he drew his sword from its scabbard, and an aura enveloped his blade. The giants were surprised from their reactions. It was clear that they knew that the aura was dangerous. Then we see the monster pull Jin's knife out of its belly. Jin was surprised to see this, as the giant's wound was immediately repaired. This kind of regeneration rate is only found in the highest class of demonic monsters. But these two were humans just a moment ago, confusing Jin. There were a lot of mages passing through Zippel's territory. Jin assumed that these strange monsters were living golems. Their creation is a serious crime. Jin wondered if the Zippels could use the Kolon ruins as a laboratory for experiments with forbidden magic. Living golems have the strength and speed of a weak rank 4 monsters. Their movements are clumsy, worse than those of rank 4 swordsmen who have been properly trained, and it's not difficult to fight them, Jin thought. He knew a golem wouldn't stop even if seriously injured. To neutralize it, you need to destroy the core. We can see that a golem's core can be its head, heart, or stomach. Although these golems are illegal to create, but they are no different from ordinary golems. So Jin started hitting the cores. First, he hit the golem in the head, but there was no core. The golem's strength and speed didn't drop at all. Moreover, it became more aggressive. Then Jin decided that if not the head, then there was only one place left. He cut the golem in half and a blue ball fell out of it. This was the core. Jin, of course, broke it. He couldn't believe that the Zippels would even outrage their fellow humans. Suddenly, a golem pounced on Jin from behind, but he managed to react and hit his arm with the sword, causing the golem to cry out in pain. Then Jin hit the heart, and it turned out that there was a core and the golem died. Jin let out a sigh of relief and thought about how the magic was almost released, and it was close. Suddenly, Jin heard someone pleading. It turned out that the remains of the golem looked like a man in tears was asking to be killed. Jin felt sorry for him, but he pulled himself together and did it. Jin didn't know what had happened to these people, but no one would become a living golem of their own choice, especially since after the transformation, they become consumable material with no future. Still, Jin knew this wasn't the time to be angry. However, he didn't expect this to happen and witnessed the terrible sight of the Zippels. Jin assumed that the sisters were aware of the situation when they gave him the mission, but no one canceled the mission, knew that even if he told the whole world the truth, the Zippel family would find a way to cover it up. Because creating live golems is a serious enough crime for the Empire's investigative committee to press them. In the meantime, he decided to gather evidence and continue the mission. Still, Jin knew that even the Zippels could completely deny their involvement, but that was not a problem. So far, the mages haven't made any big moves. This means that most of them are unaware of the real situation. If they had known that the guards were living golems, they wouldn't have been so careless about guarding the warehouses. Consequently, not everyone in the Kolon ruins was involved in the crime. After entering the warehouse, Jin saw that the defensive magic on the stone slab was simple, but the one on the dishes was quite strong. According to Jin, he would refrain from using magic so that his family or the Zippels don't find out. But 2 live golems are dead, so the Zippels will have to bury all the mess Jin makes. He started using magic, and flames appeared in his hand, and shadow energy appeared in the other, and he combined them together and decided that he would burn everything there that he could. He used explosive flames. Then we see Luna angrily asking the sisters who sent Jin to Zippel's territory if they're out of their minds. After all, Jin is 10 years younger than them. Luna asked why they did it. One of the sisters asked if Luna was asking, because she really didn't know. Luna said that wasn't an answer, and asked the sisters if they had started a battle for the hierarchy with a junior of the middle rank. Luna said that the unspoken rule of war is that standard bearers are against standard bearers, and non-standard bearers are against each other. Luna told them to be ashamed because even she was sorry that the sisters were the family's standard bearers. Sister Anne screamed that Luna had never interfered in their squabbles because she had such power. Luna interrupted her by saying that if they had won after Junior's trial, she wouldn't have said a word, but Jin had succeeded on the mission in the Call and Ruins and must be reporting back to Mother right now. Luna asked if the sisters understood why she was talking about shame because, after all, the sisters had given him the wings he needed to soar. Luna wondered if there had ever been a situation in their family where sabotage had failed in the same way as this one. She ordered the sisters to leave, but before the sisters left, she managed to say that according to her observations, Jin wasn't the type to show mercy. She asked them to be careful and said that she was only saying this out of concern for them, and that even if something went wrong, they were still her younger sisters. And now we see that Luna is already in her room. Nanny said she thought Luna was going through puberty again, since she'd raised her hand against her younger siblings as soon as she got back. Luna asked if the nanny implied that she was old. Nanny said she was worried given Jin's temperament, he would never forget something like this. Luna asked Nanny if she also thought that Jin's sisters were no match for him. Nanny said she didn't think they'd be able to face him in a real fight in 5 years, so they didn't have much time to live. Luna told Nanny not to say something so terrible out loud since they were still blood relatives. Suddenly, Luna asked Nanny if she had found the person who tried to kill Master Jin. Nanny said they weren't the two ladies because they were middle-ranked at the time, so it was no use looking at them. Luna said it made sense. According to her, it's definitely not Mary and Jonah or the Tone Twins, so the remaining suspects are Master Joshua, Master Diff, Master Ran, Vito, and Miss Rancha. Nanny said that aside from Masters Rana and Vigo, she couldn't recklessly study the others. Luna confirmed that this is the case, as the other two are known for their deception skills. According to Luna, Nanny is more likely to get a headache trying to look into them. Luna said they would watch them, and Nanny would definitely get into awkward situations if she tried to look into them herself. Nanny said that Luna had thought well, and then added that even after the assassination attempt, the young master was growing well, and that there was no need to worry too much. And then, we see Jin come home. Jilly was crying, glad that Jin was safe and sound. Jin said that everything was fine, and that soon even she wouldn't be able to beat him in a duel. Jilly said that Jin was sent to a dangerous place, and that if something went wrong, she would take revenge with her life. Murakhan asked Jin if he had reported back. Jin said that people would probably say that he completed this mission with outside help, but now he's worried about the gossip. Then he remembered something and asked Jillian and Murakhan to take a look in the jar. Jin had the heart of a living golem. Murakhan said that Jin was a favorite of fate, and that since Jin himself had returned unharmed, the golem must have been the result of a failed experiment. And then Murakhan asked Jin if he had found this heart in the ruins of Kolon. However, Jin replied that the two guards had turned into monsters, and told them that they regenerated each time he hit them, and this appeared when he pierced their cores. Hearing about the living golems, Murakhan was shocked and seriously wondered what Zippel's plan was. If last time there was a grave giant, now there are living golems. What's next? Murakhan said that in any case, if Jin's words were true, it was the Zippel's doing, given that the ruins were their territory. Murakhan then suggested that they revisit Kolon later because he wanted to ask them a few questions about what was going on. Although Jin didn't really want to go back to the living golem site, it would still be safer with Murakhan. Jin thought that if he was lucky, he might even be able to find the source of mana, and that no matter what mess they made there, the Zippel family would do their best to hide the situation. Jin agreed to Murakhan's suggestions and said that he would set aside some time to look into this. And now we see the results of the mission. Shortly after its completion, Kajin and the Haas brothers returned on their own, but Mew and Anne stripped them of their cadet qualifications and kicked them out of the Runcandle clan. Expelling cadets who had officially completed their mission was a harsh punishment, but no one felt any sympathy for them. It is now June 1795, and Jin continues to train with Pure Stone. Zed said that starting today, Junior's training with the Pure Stone is over. The twins, however, need to come to morning training sessions with the rest of the cadets. Zed said that the head would tell them something next week. The twins were surprised to hear this, but Jin was calm. The twins were thinking that it was impossible for their father to promote the younger one to trainee flag bearer. The twins quietly discussed that the trainee standard bearer must leave Run Candle to earn the honor. Daytona confirmed that the trainee must act independently, without any family support. Jin only thought that it had finally happened, and that he wouldn't have to endure the dissecting attention of everyone around him anymore. He was happy to be able to develop his strength the way he wanted. And here we see Chiron walking at the head of the army. Khan informed him that they would reach the Garden of Swords in 2 hours. Chiron said that the youngest continues to interfere with his training. Chiron had planned to stay on the Black Sea for 10 years. But this was not the first time that he had to leave to attend to Jin. Khan said that he had sensed that young Master Jin was unusual back in the Tempest Castle, but he couldn't have guessed how much, and what Jin was doing in the Garden of Swords really shocked him. Chiron said that his fighting spirit is extraordinary. Even though Jin was a child, his eyes showed deep regret when they first met, although Chiron thinks Jin was still trying to hide it. Chiron said that he couldn't forget how Jin provoked his siblings as soon as he arrived at the Garden of Swords. Although no one had ever taught him this, the junior instinctively knew the rule of destroying opponents. Chiron said that the other brats knew this and tried to keep Jin, but he survived and came back every time his siblings threw him into the clutches of death, and now he's 5th rank. Apart from Mammoth and the ruins of Cologne, Chiron was more interested in the first mission, the fact that Jin fought one-on-one with a White Wolf tribe warrior and won. Chiron expected the younger to use his subordinates as a shield, but who would have thought that he could handle it alone and bring them all alive? Chiron said that by doing this, Jin was able to prove the validity of his own promises. Khan asked Chiron if he really believed that Jin killed one of the White Wolves on his own, to which Chiron replied that he did. But the truth is that it was possible only because he used the Shadow's power. But anyway, according to Chiron, observing Jin is fun, and Chiron is going to learn the details of the first mission from him. And so they arrived at the gate of the Garden of Swords. Chiron was walking along the red carpet, and soldiers were lined up on both sides of Chiron. Rose and Luna met Chiron, and he told her that she did well. But Rose said that Joshua had prepared everything himself, so she didn't have to do anything. Chiron then replied that if Rose said so, since the grown children could do this fine without him, there was no need for him to leave the Black Sea. Chiron said that the guests they would receive today would be overly attentive to him, and asked if it would make life difficult for the children, seeing such a huge party. Rose said that it was all right, and asked everyone to go inside because she had prepared their favorite dishes. Suddenly, as Chiron was passing by Jin, he noticed that Jin had 2 swords in his scabbard. He turned to Ran and Vigo and asked them if they had returned the swords he had given them. Ran said that it was Junior who stole the swords from them, as they agreed to give them to him if he successfully completed the mission in the ruins of Cologne. Chiron smiled broadly, then laughed out loud. Chiron placed a hand on Ran's shoulder, told them to make sure they got them back, and noted that Jin was perceptive, so much so that Chiron sometimes wonders if he's really his son. Jin and Chiron, standing side beside Chiron, also told Jin that it seems to be his first banquet in his previous life thanks to his teacher. Jin had attended some of the other family's receptions, but this was the first time he had visited the main family. On the rare occasions when banquets were held, Jin hid like a criminal, and now he is the guest of honor at his father's side. Jin started to think about something, but Chiron threw him off by talking to him. Chiron said he was sure Jin knew this, but their family rarely held such events because they only celebrated those occasions that were worth celebrating. In other words, Chiron said that Jin's achievements are quite high. Chiron placed a hand on Jin's shoulder and asked him how many guests he thought they had invited. Jin guessed there might be about 1,000. That's right, Chiron said. The number has increased by about 200 since the last time 7 years ago. This shows that the Runkendell family's prestige has grown in these 7 years. Chiron said that from time to time, other families organized huge banquets, but all the 1,000 guests gathered here today are outstanding people. For 7 years, Chiron did nothing but continue his training destroying demonic creatures in the Black Sea. Chiron said that their family's authority continued to grow. However, in the current era, he was the only one who had become the quintessential knight. Chiron knew that if he disappeared, it was very likely that most of the people here would turn their backs on the Runkendells. Also understood that without his father, the Runkendell would not have had so much power. The Runkendell and Zippel families are the 2 main families, but with the patriarch gone, the gap in military power between them will widen significantly. In that case, the Zippel family would have absolute superiority over everyone else. Jin turned to his father and said that if it wasn't for him, if all these people decided to turn their backs on them, if the Zippels started to oppress them and push them into a corner, Jin would leave the family nest. Chiron asked what Jin was talking about. Jin continued that if the Runkandel family failed without Chiron, it would indicate the incompetence of the next head. Jin said he wasn't going to die a miserable death under such a patriarchy. Jin then asked Chiron how many other people's vulnerabilities they had at their disposal. He said that in exchange for the return of his brother's sword, Vigo would show him the family's custom contracts, which only standard bearers have access to. The head of the Varenga family deceived the emperor and pocketed the treasures of the empire, but through their efforts, his relatives could attend this banquet without a twinge of conscience. The Clever family recently asked them to remove magicians from the Zippel family. Harold's daughter sold the family heirlooms to support her gambling addiction, and she also did not pay the commission fee. Jin had a bloodless weapon at his disposal. With a single glance, he said that there should be a lot more weaknesses in the secret contracts that only Chiron and Jin's mother are allowed to view. Chiron asked if Jin was saying that even without him, he could have protected the family. Jin said that if the head, without becoming the quintessential knight, leads the family, then everything will depend on his diplomatic abilities. Chiron said they weren't the only ones who knew about these secrets though, since the Zippel family had just as many spies as them. Jin said he was sure of it, but the Zippels would never be able to justify owning such things. Jin said it was because the role of villains belongs to the Runkandel. He went on to say that regardless of whether the next patriarch can use this weapon or not, Jin will leave the family without a second thought and then prepare for revenge on the Zippels, no matter how long it takes. Chiron grinned and said that it wasn't so bad after all. You have to be alive to get their revenge. It suddenly occurred to him that the other children didn't have the guts to talk about the possibility of the Runkandel falling in front of him, just bragging or whining. But Junior, he thought with a smile. Junior is bluntly stating his conclusions while remaining completely unfazed. Chiron was only sorry that Jin had appeared in his declining years. But Chiron felt that Jin had all the talents of Luna, Mary's wild nature, and Diff's fighting spirit. Chiron reflected that so long as he could be in charge, he would enjoy watching Junior turn the line of succession upside down. Chiron said that it looked like most of the guests had already arrived, and it was time for them to join in. At that moment, Chiron remembered something. He told Jin that there was something Chiron would like to discuss with Jin after the banquet, and that Jin would be called. Jin was sure that this would be a promotion to trainee standard bearer, and it looked like he would be leaving the Garden of Swords soon. Jin was thinking that the 4 days of the reception would be really long. Suddenly, a man ran up to them, shouting and calling for Chiron. It turned out that the guests had arrived uninvited. Chiron couldn't understand. He was starting to think that since they were intruders, he assumed they were the Zippel family, and so it turned out. Chiron asked if they were Zippels, and the man said that there were 5 of them, the second in command Andrel Zippel and his family, which was very bold of them. Chiron ordered Heinz to tell Andre to scram and invite the others inside. At this moment, Jin thought about how Andre Zippel had really brazenly intruded, but Jin didn't expect that his father would reject the deputy mages like this. Chiron asked Jin if he thought it was too rude, to which Jin replied that he thought it was fine. The moment Andre Zippel expresses his displeasure and leaves with his family, he ignores the order of the head of the Runkandels to enter the other 4, and all of them will leave. Andre will comply, and if he doesn't, he'll go home with his legs cut off. Chiron said it was about time for the banquet to start, and here he is, standing over the hall and thanking everyone that they had come. He said that after receiving such a beautiful son in his declining years, it seemed that he would finally be able to get rid of his burden. Chiron said he wanted them to express their appreciation for his youngest son, so Chiron began to talk about the rules of the banquet, which are only 2 in number. If a guest is caught up in a fight while being drunk, follow the guards to the arena. The loser must obey, and the winner must show mercy, because they are at the banquet after all. Jin knew it was inevitable. Hundreds of influential people are gathered in one place, and all of them are entangled in a web of favor and malice. If it was a peaceful party, they would just stare at each other and disperse. But this is a banquet in the Garden of Swords. By following the rules set by Chiron, you can knock out all life from your enemy, even if you don't kill him. In any case, guests have the opportunity to show others who is really the best. Chiron, standing on the balcony, said that he hoped that each of the guests would have a good time. Chiron then turned to Jin, who told him that if Jin found someone who liked him, then let him drag him to the ring. But he didn't choose those who looked weaker if they didn't offend anyone. Jin said that he was sure that losing was forbidden. Chiron said that it was obvious, and that if Jin lost, His father would take everything from Bradamanti to the nanny. It was the first time the patriarch and Jin had had such a conversation. In his previous life, Jin had never dreamed of such a thing, and they had interacted like father and son. However, Jin's goal isn't to get his father's calling or become a pet. His only goal is to surpass Chiron. And then we see Jin talking to the guests, and suddenly the twins come up to him. They congratulated Jin on his 5th rank and asked if he would mind if they stood together. Jin asked them how the Pure Stone training was going. Hayden said it was better, they had done well after using the weapons their uncle recommended. After that, Jin said in Hayden's ear that this was enough to look natural and ordered them to leave. Suddenly, a man came up to him and said that it was nice to meet him. It was the first standard bearer of the Ken family. The brothers went, and Jin wished them good luck with their training. Jin told the man that he had heard many impressive stories about his heroic deeds since he was a child. Suddenly, someone came up from behind and grabbed Jin's head, and the standard bearer in front of Jin was shocked. The man who grabbed Jin said that he was just dying of curiosity about what kind of child got the 5th rank at 15. He said Jin was a small kid and looked 10 years younger than him. Finally, he introduced himself, and his name was Huger. Jin held back. He just said hello to Huger. Huger said that Jin was really an amazing guy and asked if he was going to shame him for talking to Jin a little informally. Huger told Jin that even though he was a rung candle in the world of martial artists, Huger was still his senior. Jin then told Huger from the Tuco family to listen carefully. Jin said that his actions just now offended Jin and all the guests for being disrespectful to him, and he said that if he was going to make a big fuss about who was older, he should do it more carefully. The 1st and 2nd standard bearers of the Ken family, the Knight Order of the Dragon King, the Order of the Black King, and Huger were younger than all of them, but they still treated Jin with respect. Jin told Huger to admit his mistake, and then added that he would pretend it didn't happen. The standard bearer approached Huger and said that Jin had just saved his life and asked him to do his. Jin sat. The standard bearer from the Ken family also said that he knew that sooner or later, Huger would get in trouble for having a long tonawe, and then asked Huger to handle things in a nice way this time, and not act so narrow-minded. So Huger listened to his companions and apologized to Jin. Then Huger left in shame. Luna came up to Jin and said that he definitely has a talent for finding enemies, although it would be nice if Jin could act like a normal child too, she said. Jin replied that he was actually a representative of the Run Candle family right now, and they had a drink together. Luna asked Jin what he would do if Huger challenged him to a duel since Huger is about rank 6. Jin said that, if that was the case, the Ken family head and the other seniors watching them would have stopped the fight. Luna asked in surprise if Jin had even considered this in his calculations, and asked when he had learned how the elite hides all quarrels and agreements. Jin said that if there was someone who could teach him such things, it would be nice to keep him around. Luna said that the sword training is enough. What else is needed? Jin said it would be hard for Luna to understand, but there are still a lot of things you need to survive in a family where you are so hated. At that moment, Luna was thinking that Jin was talented and had a bright mind, and was why they were trying to kill him. Luna was wondering who had noticed Jin's talent so early. Luna said that she was only here because it was Jin's banquet anyway, but it was kind of boring here, so she said that she would go to a more fun place. She said that Jin was too short to dance with her now, and that she would take him somewhere nice when he grew up. And before she left, she decided to try sending a message in an elite way. She took Jin's head in her hands and put hers to him. Luna said that it would become clear to everyone how much she valued Jin, so few people would dare to be rude to him in fear of her. The guests saw this and immediately understood the message. We can see that somewhere in the distance, a man was Bubari Gustin. He said that he also wanted to put his head on the head of Lady Luna. It turned out to be Bubari, and next to him was Viscal, who shut Bubari up. And then we see that Viscal's younger sister, Margiela Ivliano, asked Viscal not to be so cruel to Bubari, because this is important to him. She said that the only reason she could safely attend the banquet was because Bubari believed in her and took her with him. Viscal only covered his face with his hand while Bubari talked happily to her. Jin only thought that playing host was tiring. He wondered where Zippel was and if he should go look for them. Suddenly, someone loudly placed the glass on the table right in front of him. She asked if Jin would mind if she dared to ask the rising star of the Runkendell family for a drink. It was Cirrus and Dorma. Jin pretended not to know her. Cirrus smiled as if she knew something and said it was an honor to meet him. So she introduced herself, and they met. Jin said that he was glad to meet the daughter of the Ice Palace Master. Cirrus said that they were the same age and asked how Jin had achieved so much so quickly. She said that she envied the genetics of the blessed Runkendell family. Jin said that he was convinced that she was also very gifted because the blood of the Ice Palace is a gift in itself. Jin said that he didn't dare to guess how much the head of the Ice Palace valued her. She said that she was extremely happy because unlike him, she was the only daughter. Cirrus then suddenly apologized for being rude. Jin said that wasn't the case at all, since everyone knew that he is the youngest. At the same time, he was thinking that it was quite tiring to have so many siblings. Jin thought it was strange because he was sure she recognized him, but he couldn't understand why she hadn't brought up the subject of Mammoth yet, and he knew that the soot on his face hadn't stopped her from putting it all together. Cirrus then turned to Jin and said there was one thing she wanted to know. She asked if his leg was okay. There was an awkward silence in the air at first, but then Jin said that everything was fine, even though he couldn't return the favor of such a great person who used medicine for Jin's leg. Cirrus said that Jin was being more impudent than he looked. She said that Jin owed her an explanation about what he was doing in Moonwell. Cirrus said that her people were unable to find the terrorist mage, and this dealt a severe blow to her pride. Then she wondered if the boy she let go was guilty. Jin asked her if she thought he was a criminal. Cirrus said she didn't think so, but the Runkendellsville family had assigned him a mission. Jin had hired a mage because the scope of the mission was beyond Jin's abilities, so things would have been different. Furthermore, of the possible targets of the Runkendells, they were only members of the Ice Palace there, and the head of the 7th Sword of the Ice Palace. She can't just ignore what happened. Jin realized that she had misunderstood everything and believed that he was after her people. But considering that he had inadvertently harmed the members of the Ice Palace by targeting Alcaro, there was truth in her words. Jin pretended that he didn't understand how this confirmed his involvement, and said that everything he said was just for speculation. Cirrus was annoyed that he was playing innocent and decided to react. She said she would drag him into the arena, then beat him to a pulp and spit in his cocky face. She challenged Jin to a duel. Jin said that his father had warned him sternly not to fight those who were weaker, but if Ceres wanted him to, he was willing to make a concession. Now Jin is on his way to the arena, telling the guards that he wants everyone except the medical team to temporarily withdraw in order to give 2 swords in good condition. The guards said they wouldn't let anyone in until the duel was over. Jin was thinking that Cirrus was still the daughter of the Ice Palace Master, so breaking her in front of everyone would be too much. Cirrus told Jin that before they started, she wanted to get a promise from Jin if she wins. He will tell her everything that happened in Mammoth that day, without missing a single detail. Jin agreed and said that in return, if he won, Cirrus would pretend that she had never seen him in Moonwell. Well, Cirrus realized that it looked like Jin's conscience wasn't clear, so they started and Jin charged. The sword of Cirrus was covered in ice. It was an ability passed down in the Endorma family, 10,000 ice swords. Jin thought it was funny, and told Cirrus that he didn't think she would use the secret technique in the first place. He said that he was a little sad since he hadn't learned his family's secret technique yet. Cirrus got angry and said she didn't care. They continued to fight, but so far they were on an equal footing. As they fought, Cirrus realized that Jin was definitely ranked 5, although he was in a hurry to block her ability. As the battle progressed, his real skills would be revealed, and Cirrus knew it. However, she believed that the difference of 1 rank would more than make up for 10,000 level 3 ice swords. She was thinking that Jin was superior in both strength and stamina, so she couldn't let this battle drag on. Jin was learning her moves and would counterattack, so she had to put an end to it. Right now, Jin knew that she was a 4th ranked swordmaster. Even if she was able to use 10,000 ice swords, there was no chance that she would be able to defeat him in a fair one-on-one duel. Jin is sure that she is aware of the gap between them and is preparing to end it with just 1 slice. She will definitely use a secret technique, but Jin doesn't know how strong the ice sword's attack will be. Jin decided that then he would just respond with his own secret move, and now the hero is transferred to memories in the Tempest Castle. Jin had memorized dozens of forbidden books out of the many secret techniques he had learned, and of these, there was also the strongest one. Suddenly during the battle, Cirrus smiled as she told Jin that this was the end. Cirrus used the 3rd style of ice sword, Avalanche. The ice crystals flying at Jin were imbued with an aura. Cirrus was just standing on the sidelines and was sure that Jin would lose. But suddenly, Jin smiled. She was baffled by the fact that he was smiling because Avalanche was released. She thought about how Runkendell might be a prodigy who reached the 5th rank at the age of 15, but he wasn't able to resist the secret technique. But Cirrus had a bad feeling. Suddenly, Jin started screaming for her to dodge, and then there was an explosion. Suddenly, a sword appeared right in front of her face, but she managed to dodge. After the explosion, Jin thought that he should have used something other than the Attila family storm technique, since this destructive power is not something that the 4th rank can handle. If Cirrus didn't dodge, then she's probably dead or unconscious. Then he saw Cirrus sitting on the floor. She was confused and thought about how she was afraid of death and avoided it by a millisecond. She hadn't expected this from herself. Jin asked her if she was okay because he almost killed her and apologized to her. He knew that Cirrus had heard his warning, but if she hadn't tried to avoid the storm of blades, as much as she values her honor and pride, Cirrus is still just a 15-year-old child and too young to suppress her desire to live. Jin then told her that if he were in her position, he would also dodge, and he was sure that she would also advise him to duck. He was trying to calm her down. Cirrus took something out of her pocket and told Jin that he had a cut on his face, which turned out to be the same cream. She said it was the price of saving her life. Jin asked her if she didn't think too low of her life being the most successful in the Ice Palace. She asked Jin not to worry. As she left, Cirrus said that it was a pleasure to meet him and that they had met for the first time today, but they would see each other again tomorrow. And now the next day has arrived. So the real banquet starts. Now Jin was thinking that he might be able to meet those guys from Zippel, had heard that they were all between 15 and 20 years old, in which Jin would be able to compare their skills if they were the same age. Jin wanted to ask a few questions about Colin, but he knew better than to say anything. In any case, when he became the reserve standard bearer, he would have some free time to take a leisurely stroll through the ruins with Murakan. Jin thought that using Murakan to find the mana fountain wouldn't be a problem, so Zippel wouldn't be able to continue forging mages. This time, Jin will be able to prevent something terrible from happening. Suddenly, Jin saw the cat and wondered why it was there. Cirrus saw the cat and started playing with it while Jin was angry. She looked at the cat's collar and saw the name Moth Runkendel. She asked if Jin gave the cat that name. Jin said it was him. Then someone approached them, saying that they knew they would find them if they followed the cat. It turned out that it was Veridin from the Zippel family, who said that Jin had no idea how long he had been looking for him. Veridin didn't immediately say his name, but gave him a hint that his name starts with the letter V. Jin said he didn't remember. Veridin then gave another clue, saying that the place where they first met was the teleportation gate, but Jin said that he still didn't remember. Veridin said that Jin's memory was much worse than he expected. Then he finally gave his name. Jin said that if he insists on acting like he's seeing him for the first time, it should be obvious that he doesn't want to show that they met before. Jin only thought how that the person in front of him would become a 9-ranked mage by the time he was 30 and take over as the head. Veridin said that if he could use magic, he would find Jin faster, but this is Runkandel territory, so using magic is forbidden. Veridin said that it had been 5 years and that he couldn't believe that Jin was already ranked 5. Veridin said that he didn't waste any time either. His magic abilities are already ranked 6th. Couldn't believe that the Zippel family's greatest prodigy, Veridin, was only ranked 6th at 18. Thought that if he were in his position, he would probably have already received the 7th rank. Jin thought that for some reason, Veridin was lying about his rank. Veridin said that he was looking for Jin for the sake of that expression, and that he would look forward to the day when he could fight Jin. So he asked Jin to work hard. Jin thinks that regardless if Veridin was actually able to reach the 6th rank only in his 18th year, then after the current head of the Zippel family Celiac, Jin is the closest to the pinnacle of magic. Jin told Veridin to learn to close his mouth and save his breath. Jin asked Veridin why the Zippel family came to the banquet uninvited. It turned out that it was all because of Veridin, because he was annoying Uncle Andre, because he wanted to see Jin. Veridin said that they were just on vacation in the Huefester area when he heard about the banquet and realized that it was destiny. Jin told Veridin to be quiet and then leave. Veridin said that Jin should also come to the Zippel banquet unannounced too. Jin then asked him what would happen if he committed a terrorist act there. It replied that he always kept his word, and he said that even if Jin did, Veridin wouldn't kill him, and if there were a fight, he wouldn't take part in it. Suddenly, Jin said that there was a nasty guy who had been staring at him for a while, and here we see Bubbery terrified. Jin asked him if he had anything to say to him. Bubbery asked when Lady Luna was coming. Bubbery said that he wanted to give it to her. He was holding in his hand some notebook on which he and Luna were drawn. This is a collection of poems that he wrote all night and filled them with his love. Bubbery had said that when she read it, he was sure Lady Luna would understand that he was better than he looked. Bubbery had said that Jin might become his brother-in-law in the near future. Jin got angry and Veridin even spat out the wine he was drinking. Jin grinned and then said that it looked like the dear guest needed a good beating and immediately tore up the collection. Jin said that Buburi not only mentioned the name of Luna's sister, but also dared to call Jin his brother-in-law. Jin said that in Buburi's eyes, the Runkendal family looked pathetic. Jin ordered the guards to escort Buburi to the arena. Buburi only shouted that he showed his love and did not understand why they did this to him. He screamed in horror about how Jin could treat a guest like this, and so they came out of the building where the banquet was being held. The knights threw Buburi into the arena. While he was wondering why, Jin took off his raincoat and said that they would proceed with a hand-to-hand combat. As they walked, Buburi couldn't understand why Jin was doing this. He wondered if Jin had found out that Buburi had transformed those Zippels 5 years ago. Vyskel, who was standing nearby, saw Buburi and was shocked. Margiela said it looked like Buburi and young Master Jin were engaged in a duel. Vyskel was angry with Buburi. He said that he and Margiela should go closer to observe the duel. Cirrus was confused as she tried to challenge him to another duel during the banquet, but Jin refused. She couldn't understand why Jin would fight with such a guy. Meanwhile, Varadin said that it looked like pestering his uncle until he allowed him to come was a good decision. Varadin didn't even consider meeting the Ice Palace heiress. Varadin said he was pleased to meet you and was about to introduce himself, but Cirrus immediately made it clear that she didn't want to talk with him, so the referee started introducing the contestants, first introducing Jin, the rising star of the Runkendal family. He then asked who was fighting against young Master Jin. The referee had never seen him. Varadin, watching from Cirrus' side, said that he had heard that Buburi had come with members of the Ivliano family and that despite his appearance, he might be an experienced fighter. Buburi asked Jin to give him a chance to introduce himself before the duel, at least formally. But suddenly, while Buburi was introducing himself, Jin punched him in the face and broke his glasses. Jin said he didn't even want to know his name. In rage, Buburi swung his hand, a green aura emanating from his first. Jin guessed from this aura that Buburi was somewhere in the 6th rank. Cirrus said that the young master chose a stronger opponent, because he could already use aura. Buburi hit Jin with a punch. Buburi began to gloat over Jin. Buburi thought that Jin dared to attack him with such meager abilities. After enduring the blow, Jin said that Buburi would whine for forgiveness. Then we see Jin hit Buburi in the face with his palm. He was clearly furious. Jin then continued to throw punch after punch, with Buburi just defending and blocking. Still, Jin managed to break through Buburi's defense, and the last 2 blows knocked Buburi unconscious. Varadin said that Jin unleashed a barrage of attacks when he made him lose his guard, but Varadin added that he didn't expect anything less from Jin. Suddenly, Margiela screamed at Vyskel, and everyone's attention shifted to them. She said that she was disgusted by Master Jin's actions. She said that he couldn't believe that Jin could beat up a person like that after he had already won the duel. Margiela said that it wasn't fair for young Master Jin to pick on a weak opponent. Then she asked Vyskel if he would just sit there and watch since Buburi was their friend. Vyskel said that Buburi is not weaker than the young master. Margiela said she was disappointed in Vyskel and wanted him to teach young Master Jin a lesson using a much more honorable method. The guests who were nearby wanted to see the continuation of the fight and tried in every possible way to encourage Vyskel to do so. Vyskel had to agree, even if he didn't want to. Then we see Vyskel call out to Jin, who was holding Buburi, who was unconscious by the shirt. Vyskel said why don't Jin let Buburi go and fight him. Jin knew about Vyskel Ivliano, and that he was a knight of the 7th rank. Jin would come out of this duel with much honor regardless of losing or winning. Besides, it would be a good experience for Jin to be able to fight Ivliano. After all, even Chiron recognized the strength of their previous leader. Then Jin shifted his gaze. He thought that Margiela Ivliano was a funny young lady, putting her brother in a difficult position to watch their fight. Jin said that Vyskel seemed to hold his sister very dear. Jin added that as someone who also has a sister, he understands Vyskel's feelings. Jin said that his sister was important to him, so he said that he wanted him to keep the servants on leash from now on. Vyskel, in an awkward state, said that Jin had misunderstood one point. Vyskel said that the man Jin had just turned into mincemeat wasn't a servant, but their companion, Vyskel, asked if Buburi Gaston had made a mistake. Hearing this, Jin was shocked. Vyskel said that Buburi is only present to help his sister, who has difficulty moving around and his abilities are not quite suitable for the Runkendal banquet. Vyskel told Jin that he was sure that Buburi had no ill intentions, so he asked Jin to ignore his actions. Jin was surprised and kept thinking about Buburi. He couldn't believe that this guy was Buburi Gaston, the transformation mage. Jin was thinking about the relationship between Vyskel and Buburi. Jin was sure that there was no mention of the Ivliano family's connection to Gaston in his previous life when Buburi was arrested. Wondered if Vyskel knew that Buburi was a transformation mage. Although Jin had finally found Buburi, he now had more questions. He gathered his thoughts and decided that he couldn't afford to be distracted when his opponent was a rank 7. So Viscal urged Jin to do his best. Jin decided to focus on the duel. He said he hoped to learn a lot from Viscal. We see Viscal immediately launch an attack, but Jin is able to block it. Jin was surprised that, judging from one punch, Viscal's strength was more than rank 7. Jin was surprised that Viscal's swordsmanship was on par with Uncle Zed. Jin knew that he couldn't comprehend the trajectory of Viscal's sword, so he defended himself with one hand wrapped around the blade of the sword. The guests discussed Jin being pushed back quickly, but still holding up well. The guests said that the Ivliano family swordsmanship was famous for its cunning and unconventional essence, and anyone who suffered at the hands of the swordsman would never want to fight against Ivliano again. Varadin smiled and thought that the guests didn't know anything, because in such situations, these guys of Runcandle only shine brighter. If the Ivliano family sword is like a treacherous snake, then the Runcandle sword is an indestructible rhinoceros. Even if its horn is almost broken, it doesn't stop rushing forward. Then their swords collided again. With this blow, Viscal cut Jin in the chest area. Jin tried to counterattack, but Viscal easily dodged. Jin knew that Viscal obviously wouldn't fight at full strength, but still, Jin managed to fight well against an opponent with a rank higher than 7th, while he himself was only on the 5th. Jin had almost reached his limit, but he was starting to feel it again. We see Jin reminiscing about the duel with Kajin, felt the same way he did in that fight. Jin suddenly took up a stance with his eyes closed and an aura began to radiate from his sword. Suddenly Viscal said it was a good fight. Then he took a quick swipe at Jin, but Jin still had his eyes closed. Viscal hit Jin's sword and a crack appeared on it. Jin's sword was shattered into 2 pieces, but Jin continued to stand with his eyes closed. Viscal raised his sword to Jin's throat, indicating it was all over, while Jin himself fell unconscious. Viscal then began to check his neck. He found that a scratch had appeared on his neck. Although Viscal won, he was shocked that Jin was able to injure him. Viscal looked at Jin, who was lying unconscious and couldn't understand what happened at the end. The moment the sword broke, Viscal felt something sharp graze his throat, basically assumed that Jin had realized the state of the sword during their duel. If Jin had reacted a second earlier, and Viscal a second later, Viscal would have died. So the servants carried Jin away on a stretcher. Viscal thought that Jin was a scary guy.